Dawn came thin and blew over the red mesas, the kind of light that peeled night away slowly, as if the desert didn't quite trust the day. Frost glazed the sage like powdered sugar, the river wore a white breath where it bent toward the cottonwoods. Tala Begay stood with her palms open to the cold, feeling the bite settle into her skin, feeling the world sort itself into edges she could grip. She had slept little. All night the drums in her chest had not stopped, steady, stubborn, a low thunder that refused to be reasoned with. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. She watched her father, hasty and Nez, tall as the windbreak and twice as unbending, arrange the morning in quiet gestures, a nod to the elders by the fire, a hand upon the stallion's neck, a glance that measured the pale rider approaching from the east with a haze of dust around him. The rider had come yesterday and slept with the horses, a thing Tala had not seen a rancher do. She had watched him from the shadow of the wagon, curious despite herself. In the first light, the stranger looked younger than he'd seemed, the beard less bristled, the eyes less iron. Still, there was hardness where his jaw met conviction. Cole Matheson dismounted with a stiffness that said he always told his body to keep moving long after it wanted to stop. He set his hat against his thigh, his hair was the color of wet straw. Tala saw the way he looked at the dun mare, not like a man seeing money, but like a thirsty person seeing a river. Need softened people's faces, it told truths better than their mouths did. In the letter you wrote, Chief Nez said, voice like dry creek stones, you offered 13. Cole's boots were dust-rimed, his coat mended at the elbow with a neat, stubborn stitch. He met the chief's eyes and did not swallow his words. $13, he said. 1 silver $half, the rest paper, Union Bank of Santa Fe. That's all I could scrape without starving the winter hay. A murmur moved through the circle. 13 sounded like insult if one listened with pride and not with hunger. Tala felt the old men bristle the way ponies bristle when a rattler clicks. But her father's mouth did not change. His eyes slid to Tala and then to her sister, Ayla, quieter, softer in the face, a river to Tala's flint. The chief's gaze came back to the mirror. You wrote that your herd is hoof rot, Chief Nez said, calm as measuring. That the dun walks clean and you need clean feet to teach the others to heel. Cole's hand opened, palm up. Yes, sir. Tala heard the sir as a fence he built between himself and the world so things wouldn't break through. She had known fences like that, woven out of obedience and fear and a hope that if you laid your life out neatly, trouble might step around it. Trouble never did. Chief Nez stroked the mare's neck, the dun flicking her ears with the lazy arrogance of the beautiful. This horse, he said, is worth more than paper. But I am not selling a horse. He turned then, in a way that made Tala straighten without meaning to. I am buying a promise. Cole blinked. Sir? Promise, the chief repeated, tasting the word as if it might reveal a trick. This river runs through your southern pasture and through our winter camp. The water is one. The fish do not know your fence posts. Our children drink where your calves drink. I have lived long enough to know that when men forget the river is one, blood colors it. You want the mare? Good. I will take your $13 to make the paper men happy. But the price is this, for one winter, my daughters will live at your ranch. They will learn your ways with cattle, you will learn our ways with land. You will teach them to judge the sky for storms, they will teach you to listen to the ground you walk. And when spring eats the last of the snow, you will bring them back whole, or you will answer to me. The morning widened with the words. Tala felt them climb into her like sparrows, frantic and soft. Ayla made a small sound beside her, the kind that could be mistaken for a swallow catching wrong. Cole's face did something complicated. Fear. Surprise. A flare of anger that tried quickly to be good manners. Chief Nez. I am not sending them as chattel, the chief said and struck the word like a rattler's head. Not as payment. Not as wives. As witnesses. As bridges. You want to run cattle on Riverland? Then you must be seen. You must be known. This is our way when we want the future to be different than the past. Tala tasted iron under her tongue. She had chosen last night. When her father told them what he was thinking, she had already packed her bundle in the dark, braiding her hair twice the way her grandmother did before journeys. But now, in the ear-bleeding cold, with the stranger's eyes climbing like careful hands up the face of what her father asked, her choice felt like a second knife under the first. Cole's hand closed slowly around the silver. "It isn't safe," he said, almost to himself. "The Decker outfit has been pushing every small ranch for miles. They bait the sheriff like a bear on a chain. If they hear, if anyone thinks," he chewed the thought down and swallowed anger the way some men swallow chew, in silence, stain on the teeth. "Sir, I came for a horse, not." "You came for a way to keep your herd alive," Chief Nez said. "This is the way that does not poison the river with hate that will last after both our bones are dust. There is a cost to anything that lives. You will pay this one." Tala watched the rancher weigh the shape of the world if he said yes against the shape of the world if he said no. She felt a small, perverse affection for the way he took time with it, as if the decision were a living thing that might buck if he saddled it too quickly. Ayla's fingers found Tala's. They were warm, quick. "We choose two," Ayla murmured in Dine Bizad, so soft the frost could not hear. "Not just him. Not just father." Tala nodded without moving her eyes. "I chose last night," she whispered. "We go." Cole put the silver back in his pocket as if it burned him, then took it out again like it burned worse in there. "I don't speak for your people," he said to the chief. "But I speak for myself, and for the acres I sweat for. If your daughters come, they are not servants. They are not goods. They are guests, and the kind a man protects with the same bone he protects his own. I will take the mare. I will take the promise. If I die doing it, then I die decent." Tala felt something unclench. It was not trust. Trust was a door you only opened after you inspected the hinges. But it was respect, and respect could carry weight. Her father's mouth tipped at the corner. He did not smile. He allowed the world to see that he could, if it deserved it. "You will not die," Chief Nez said. "Not if you listen more than you talk." He turned to his daughters. "Tala. Ayla." Ayla's eyes shone like wet stone. Tala lifted her chin. "We go," she said, and her voice did not break. They rode out before the sun burned the frost off the sage. The dun mare's ears flicked at every sound. She liked the new man's hands and hit it hardly at all. Tala rode her own pinto, Little Star, with a bundle at her back and her bow snug against her thigh. Ayla rode bareback, as she preferred, the way she said she felt the world better through the horse's heat. Cole Matheson had a pack horse and a haunted way of looking at the horizon, like a man waiting for something ugly to crawl over it. "Your land," Ayla said after an hour, when the river widened and the cottonwoods bent toward each other like old women with a secret, "does it have a name?" Cole glanced over. The question seemed to startle him out of the conversation in his head. "I call it Crow's Mercy," he said. "My father trapped crows for a man named Elias Decker once. Decker said crows were thieves. My father said you can learn from a thief if you pay attention. He let the last crow go. Said everything deserves a little mercy. Decker didn't pay him a penny." The name stuck. Tala tasted the words, Crow's Mercy. Some names bent one way when you spoke them and bent another when you heard them said by someone else. "Crows remember faces," she said. "If you treat one bad, the flock will tell it for years." Cole's mouth fastened into a line. "Decker treats everything bad because he thinks it makes him impossible to harm." He kicked a pebble into the river with his heel. "He's wrong." The trail climbed out of the river valley and into a sweep of grass that wrapped the base of the mesa like a skirt. The world opened, sky so huge it felt like it should hurt to look at it. Tala breathed and let distance loosen the knots inside her. The way ahead was a ribbon pulled tight by wind and time. Crow's Mercy lay at the far edge where the slope curled down into a basin that caught the morning like a bowl. It was not much. The house had a lopsided dignity. It had decided to stand up straight despite weather's arguments. A windmill ticked slow and stubborn. A dog lifted its head and did not bark, the way animals don't waste sound when life has taught them to count. A man stepped off the porch, broad in the shoulders, white hair with a stubborn cowlick, a scar that looked like a river had changed its mind about the path it should take down his cheek. He wore his distrust on his brow, and his relief lower, where it only showed if you were skilled at reading a face for what it was trying not to say. "Boone Krieger," Cole said. "My foreman." Boone's eyes swept Tala and Ayla like measuring sticks. He spit tobacco that landed with an ugly little applause on the hard dirt. "What in God's narrow road has the world come to, Cole?" "The river's one," Cole said, quiet, the words like a rope he had learned to hold. "Chief Nez sent his daughters as witnesses. They'll be here through winter. That's the price of the mare." "The price of the mare," Boone repeated, slow, like a man hearing a joke he didn't want to admit was clever. He squinted at the Dun, whose ears had perked like she heard her name in a song. "That horse moves clean. Worth 20 in a city. Worth a fight in a county like ours." His eyes came back to Tala. "You girls know how to set fence?" Tala kept her face smooth. "Fence is wire and pliers and eyes," she said. "We have all three." Boone's mouth did not smile, but his eyes did a fraction at the edges. "We'll see," he said, and it came out more like hope than threat. "Work is a language everyone understands. It speaks faster than any treaty, more honestly than any oath." By noon Tala knew what crow's mercy was, a wound stitched with stubborn thread. The herd had raw ankles and sore minds. The corrals listed. The barn roof held back rain the way a hat holds back a river. But there was grit everywhere, ground into the boards, ground into the faces of the two boys who ran like half-wild colts, Boone's grandsons, Davin and Luke, and ground into Cole's hands, where callus had overgrown scar until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Ayla took to the windmill and the water troughs. She spoke to metal like it was a stubborn ant. Tala went with Cole to check the south fence, where he said it kept going slack. The wire had been nicked, clean, deliberate. Not coyotes. Not weather. Decker's men, Cole said, crouching, anger hitching his breath. They cut at night. It's a way of saying they can cut more. Tala knelt. The boot tracks told a story to those with the patience to listen, one heavy, toes pointed outward, one light, heels barely speaking to the earth. "One man," she said. "And a boy playing at being a ghost. They came from the draw. They left where the cottonwoods like to watch." Cole's eyes flicked to her. "You track?" "I watch," Tala said. "We can make the fence sing tight, but if you don't teach the ground to warn you when it's stepped on wrong, you'll spend your life fixing wire and never cutting the hand that cuts." They walked the fence till the sun wore down the copper. By the time they turned back, they had fixed 9 cuts and stretched 200 yards of wire. Cole's silence had shifted. It wasn't stiff with pride now, it was curious, like a man who realized the tool in his hand wasn't what he thought and was better for it. "You don't talk much," he said at last. "Words cost," Tala replied. "We make them earn." A corner of Cole's mouth bent. "Boone says I spend words like a poor man spends seed." "How does a poor man spend seed?" "Carefully," Cole said. "Then watches the sky like prayer." The image warmed Tala in a way she didn't expect. She did not tell him. She did not tell him many things, like the way the land here felt different under her horse's hooves, skittish with old fear, or the way the wind seemed to pause at the edge of the pasture, listening for the wrong name spoken too loud. They ate that night by lantern. Ayla charmed the old dog with bits of biscuit until she had a friend for life. Boone pretended not to like the company and then gave Ayla his own blanket when the stove's cough couldn't heat the corners. Davin and Luke stared the way boys do when they think staring is the same as asking, and they are hungry for the world to be bigger than the lines other men drew for them. Tala answered what they did not ask with small, useful things, a not to keep a bucket from betraying you at the worst moment, a way to walk past a skittish colt without waking his ghosts. Cole ate little. He kept listening beyond the walls, as if trouble had footsteps and a particular smell only he knew. When he did speak, it was to Boone, low. "We'll run the south pasture at first light. Check for more cuts. I want the herd in the north draw before those clouds dump their cold." Boone nodded like his bones creaked in time with the windmill. "Sheriff Barrett Crow came by while you were gone," he said. "Said Decker's buying a new section over by Dry Knife Ridge. Said he didn't want misunderstandings about water." Cole's fork stilled above his plate. "Dry Knife doesn't touch our water." Boone's eyes did a slow, old man's blink. "That's what the map says. But sometimes the sheriff reads maps the way preachers read sinners, finding whatever suits him." Ayla's gaze flicked to Tala's, quick like a swallow. Tala felt the prickles along the back of her neck wake. Sheriff Decker. Men who made their own definitions and backed them with guns and paper. She had met their kind on the trail more than once, the sort who believed a woman's face meant the world owed them a gentler edge in their requests. After the boys had been shooed to bed and Boone and Ayla fell into the quiet of contented fatigue, Cole stepped out onto the porch. Tala followed him without announcing it, because the night had something to say and men often needed a witness when they tried to hear it. The sky was a black lid freckled with salt. The cold tasted clean, like a promise made when you know you will keep it. The herd's sleep muttered at the far fence, a low music of contentment and complaint. Cole leaned on the post and let the dark press its weight into his shoulders. "My mother used to say," he said after a long time, "that a man's worth can be measured by what he returns to the ground." She meant seeds, I think. But later I decided maybe she meant more. Smiles. Kindness. Promises. I haven't had much to return. Not much left. "Why did you come to my father?" Tala asked, though she knew some part of this already in the way he stood. He took a breath that didn't quite make it to his ribs. "Because I didn't want to become Decker," he said. "Didn't want to take. Didn't want to fight until I forgot what I was fighting for." His mouth made a barbed smile. "And because I heard your father kept it done with clean feet, and I have 100 head limping like they've forgotten how to forgive the earth for being hard." Tala looked toward the dark where the Dun slept. Something warm uncoiled in her chest, the small, fierce pride she felt when anyone saw truth without her having to guide their hand to it. "We will learn each other," she said. "And maybe the ground will allow both our names at the same spring." He turned then, just his head, just enough to show he had heard every word and the one under them she had not said. "Thank you," he said, and did not try to pour more gratitude into the space than it could hold. She liked that about him, though she did not say so. The storm came at dawn without thunder, snow like sifted flour, wind that ran its knife along every seam in a man's coat. The cattle bunched the way they do when their blood remembers the prairie before fences. Tala pulled her scarf up over her face, the cold lived inside her mouth, clung to her teeth. Ayla laughed at the wind as if it had told a dirty joke and she refused to give it the satisfaction of scaring her. Boone cursed when his fingers lost feeling and then cursed softer because the curse meant his mouth still worked. "South fence first," Cole shouted over the kind of silence snow makes. They rode bowed, eyes slitted, horses squinting with ice on their lashes. The world shrank to the space a lantern might light and then shrank more, to the sound of hooves and breath and the occasional bad word giving a shape to courage. The south fence had been cut again, careful, almost delicate, as if the blade had manners. Tala felt her stomach go hard. She slid off her horse and knelt in the snow, ignoring how it invaded every opening in her clothes. Tracks were muddled by new fall, but there was a hesitation in the way the ground spoke under the snow, as if someone had lifted their feet and set them down again with a mind to deceive. "They're watching," she said. "Close." Cole didn't ask how she knew. He lifted his face like a dog scenting and found the wind wrong. "Boone," he said, "take the girls back to the barn. I'll finish here." "No," Tala said, "because sometimes the most important words are the shortest. We finish together." He gave her a look, the sort a man gives when he realizes the person beside him is not a soft thing he has to shelter, but a blade he needs to wield well. He nodded once. Together, then. They tightened wire with fingers that had forgotten the concept of heat. They mended not just the cuts, but the lies the cuts told. Twice Tala felt eyes on the back of her neck, twice she did not look, because sometimes you catch a watcher better by letting him believe he is invisible. Ayla hummed an old song. Boone hummed the tune of it later without meaning to, and Tala smiled into her scarf where no one could see. By noon the storm spent itself the way anger does when it runs out of fuel, suddenly, sloppily, with a slush of regret. The world widened again, and with sight came a reality men are always surprised by even when they have made it. The herd had drifted farther north than they should have. 2 calves were down, legs splayed like bad intentions. A coyote watched from the hill with a scholar's patience. They worked until their lungs wheezed. Boone fetched the sled. Ayla warmed small hearts with pockets of hot stones. Cole lifted more than was wise with a back already full of winter complaints. Tala held the herd together with her voice in the quiet way she moved among them, a pressure like the river, steady, not loud, always there. Crow's mercy, Boone said when they finally pushed the last calf onto its feet. You picked a traitor of a name. Mercy costs. Always did, Cole said, breath fogging with each word. Always will. Sheriff Barrett Crow came 3 days later with no invitation and a face like a shovel. He wore arrogance like a tailored coat, he wore a gun like it had been promised to him before his first tooth came in. He brought 2 deputies who didn't know how to stand without trying to look important while they did it. Behind him, like a shadow trying to be a man, rode Elias Decker's foreman, Saul Fitch, narrow-eyed, narrow-shouldered, the kind who cuts fence at night and whistles hymns in the sunrise. This is a civil visit, Sheriff Crow announced to the yard without looking to see if anyone had offered him the right to speak that way. Mr. Matheson, you and yours are harboring individuals obtained through an improper sale. The territory recognizes no such transaction. The girls are to come with us. Boone stepped forward, the kind of step that says a man's bones have already decided and his flesh is trying to keep up. You choose your words clumsy, Sheriff, he said. A person is not a mule. Sheriff Crow smiled the way a man does when he has already decided how the story ends and is done pretending otherwise. I will not argue semantics with hired hands. His gaze slid to Tala then, a movement so small she could have pretended later it hadn't happened. But she felt the weight of it and the category he placed her in when he did. The girls will be safer under my protection. Ayla laughed, sweet as a bell with a crack. Your protection sounds like a pen with a lock on it. Saul Fitch spit in the dust. You talk smart for a squaw. The yard went quiet with the kind of quiet knives make before they enter a conversation. Cole took one step, just one, and in that step Tala saw a history he didn't speak, the last time he'd seen someone spit on something that should be holy. He stopped 2 feet away, hands empty but not harmless. You'll take that word back, Cole said. Or you'll pick it out of your teeth. Saul's hand moved toward his belt, not to draw, but to let everyone watch his fingers be near draw. Sheriff Crow lifted his palm. Enough posturing, he said, looking bored. The territory does not recognize coerced labor agreements with the people upriver. I am here to prevent unrest. Tala stepped in front of Cole before he spoke. We are not labor, she said, voice low. We are witnesses. Your trouble, Sheriff Crow said, his smile widening with the relief of naming a thing in a way that made it easier to harm. Come now. I won't ask again. Cole's jaw worked. He looked at Tala. It was not a glance for permission, it was a glance between equals deciding if they would set a field on fire so new grass could grow where the old choked. Tala lifted her chin. No, she said. She liked how it felt to say a small word and pack it with her whole rib cage. Sheriff Crow's eyes cooled. Then I arrest Mr. Matheson for unlawful trafficking. He turned to his men. Take him. Boone moved like a man who had thrown his last punch in 20 years and had been waiting ever since for an excuse to throw a second. Ayla had a hand on the halter of the dun, and the dun pinned her ears and looked like she could enjoy stepping on a lawman today. The deputies hesitated, because real courage always smells different than the kind men put on for church, and in that hesitation a new sound came across the yard, the wind drum of 15 riders, the dust plume boiling like a kettle. Tala's heart went still and then hard. She knew that dust. She would have known it blind, by the way the wind changed when it carried familiar names. The riders poured into the yard like a river that had decided to visit places it hadn't been invited. Chief Nez at the front, behind him, 24 men and women Tala had grown up believing were walls. Sheriff Crow's face did a small, veiled thing. Chief Nez did not shout. He did not have to. His presence turned the world down a notch until even the birds held their tongues, waiting to see if survival required silence. He rode to Tala and put his hand to her cheek, thumb rough with work, palm warm the way winter makes anything warm an event. "Father," Tala said, and her voice broke on the first syllable in a way that would forever embarrass her in memory. "I heard there was law here," Chief Nez said, looking past her at Sheriff Crow, "trying to teach us their language for river and promise." Crow composed his face again with all the dignity a man can stitch onto panic when witnessed by 15 people he cannot outshoot. "We are here to protect." "You came to take," Chief Nez said, so soft the words might have been a blessing if they did not carry the weight of a scalpel. "You came to make a story where our daughters are things and the river listens to fences. If you touch my daughters, all the words you think make you safe will be worth less than the paper they sit on." Crow's jaw trembled in the muscle. He glanced at Cole, at Boone, at the yard where the math had changed while he tried to count. "This is not how civilized men negotiate," he said, and the word civilized slid out wearing a costume it thought made it handsome. Chief Nez's smile could have caught rope. "I agree," he said. "So we will not negotiate. You will leave. And if you stand in the river again where you do not belong, the water will remember you." The sheriff weighed his options. He found none that tasted like victory. He nodded once, jerking his chin at Saul Fitch like it hurt. The deputies turned their horses the way men do when their spines remember caution. Saul took too long looking at Tala as he left. She watched his eyes the way a woman watches a rattler that has sworn an oath with its mouth. When the law dust settled, the yard exhaled. Chief Nez slid off his horse and stood a long time looking at Cole like a blacksmith looking at metal, deciding if it would take a hammering without giving up its shape. "You kept your word," he said finally. 3 days is not winter, but it is a beginning." Cole nodded, relieved and exhausted enough to show both. "I will keep it till spring." Chief Nez's gaze entered him and looked around. "Keep it longer than that," he said. "Keep it in the way you speak to the ground when you think no one hears." He placed a small buckskin pouch in Cole's palm. It was light enough to surprise. "Medicine for hoof rot," the chief said. "Juniper ash and prayer. Boil it, cool it, mix it with tallow, whisper over it. If the cow does not believe you, she will not heal." Cole's eyes creased, the first real smile Tala had seen him allow. "I can be convincing," he said. Chief Nez turned to Tala and Ayla. "Come home in a week," he said. "Sit at your grandmother's fire and tell me what you have learned about men who think paper can call a river by a new name." "We will," Ayla said. "We have already learned that some men are mostly noise with hats on." "Do not despise noise," the chief said. "It tells you where not to put your foot." He mounted again with the grace of someone who preferred to stand on the ground but had made peace with riding when distance required it. The riders flowed from the yard the way they had come, parting around obstacles with the ease of people who have learned to take their space without asking permission. When they were gone, the yard felt louder for a moment with the absence. Boone blew out a breath. "I'm going to die," he announced to no one in particular, from the stress of watching fools try to be in charge of things they do not understand. Ayla patted his arm. "Not today," she said, and he let her be right. For a week they worked without interruption from Law or Decker. Trouble, like a man who had promised to leave, still kept a room at the inn. Tala felt it in the way the crows gathered on the windmill and talked among themselves like gossiping ants. She felt it in the way a calf spooked at shadow and would not be soothed until she sang to it under her breath the song her grandmother had taught for storms. Cole learned quickly. He put medicine on hooves with hands that had learned both gentleness and insistence from breaking colts. He listened the way her father had asked him to. He let the earth lecture him about his mistakes and did not argue while it did. And if he sometimes stared too long at the horizon, as if measuring how far a man can see before memory interferes, Tala did not mention it. On the 8th day, they took the herd to the north draw where the water ran slower and the grass kept secrets under its brown. The sky was a brittle blue, a hawk wrote its name on the air in a language only mice understand. Boone rode with the hunch of a man whose back had begun to collect debts some mornings he could not pay. Ayla ranged ahead and then doubled back, singing to herself in sheer defiance of silence. They found the sign at noon, fresh boot marks in the draw, the same heavy toes out, the same ghost light heel. They were not alone. Saul, Boone said, making the name a swear without changing a letter. Stay calm, Cole said, which is a phrase men only say when they are not. Tala breathed and let her body become a listening post. The air tasted of ash. Not fire, no smoke. The kind of ash that lives in a man's mouth when he has been planning ugly things and has chewed them so long they leave residue on his tongue. They kept the herd moving, because cattle are both problem and solution. If you stop to argue with danger, cattle will add a new one by wandering into it. The draw tightened, the banks lifting like hands making a funnel. Tala did not like it. Ayla did not like it. Boone didn't say whether he liked it, which meant he disliked it more than his teeth could transmit to his tongue. The first shot did not hit anyone. It hit a rock where it could make the sound of fear without doing the work of killing. The second shot lifted dust at Cole's stirrup. The third took Boone's hat and taught it humility. Rifles, Boone said needlessly. Up top, Ayla added. 2. No, 3. 4, Tala said, quietly. 1 heavy. 1 who sets his feet wrong when he means to shoot long. Cole's horse danced. He put a hand on the animal's neck and spoke in a language horses and men share. Steady, steady, this is the part where we do not die stupid. Keep them moving, he said, voice like rope. Straight through. Tala looked at the walls of the draw. Straight through was where a man with a plan wanted you to go. No, she said again, softer. She pointed to a game trail rat skinny up the left bank. There. They won't expect it. Boone measured the trail with eyes that had always liked wider. We'll lose 2 calves, he said. We'll lose more than that if we give them our backs, Tala said. Cole took one look at her face and nodded. Left, he said to Boone. Now. They pressured the herd like potter's hands on clay, nudging with voice and knee and the particular gravity of insistence. The cattle argued and then obeyed, because deep in their bones lives an animal that learned to survive by letting stronger minds choose the path. Shots peppered the dirt like hard rain. A calf bawled in a pitch that told Tala its fear had turned its breath into a stone. Halfway up the bank, Ayla's horse stumbled. She slid off like a cat, landed on the slope on her feet, laughed purely because she had not broken, and then her laugh cut in the middle like a rope under too much strain. A bullet took her braid, shaved it off like a scalp half-promised. She ducked and moved with a grace that would have earned praise at a dance if it had not been prayed for in a draw. Tala's vision narrowed the way it does when the world suggests it might remove something you love and is waiting to see if you will object. She did not shout. She did not cry Ayla's name. She moved her horse between Ayla and the line of fire and let the wind tell her where the next shot wanted to arrive. She lifted her bow in one smooth motion, drew to her cheek where her breath could measure the distance, and loosed. On the ridge, a man yelped. It was not one of the shooters, it was the boy, heels light, courage lighter. He fell backward with an arrow in the meat of his shoulder and rolled the way regret rolls when it starts and cannot stop. The shot stuttered. The heavy one cursed in a tempo that told Tala he had been certain of his aim and did not like discovering the world had other ideas. Cole took advantage of the pause and moved the herd faster, 2 calves stumbling, 1 down, scrabbling like a beetle. Boone went for it, because Boone had an agreement with calves that predated fear. Tala covered him with a second arrow that made the heavy gun pause again, this time in the middle of decided murder. They crested the left bank like people hauled up by a hand they could not see. The herd spilled onto the flats, spread like sorry gravy. The shots followed, now more distant, more angry than surgical. Boone hauled the calf like a sack of potatoes, breathing like a man very interested in continuing to do that activity. Ayla scrambled into the saddle with a wince where the braid had been, grinning with all her teeth to show the world it had failed to shut her up. They ran the herd crooked then straight then crooked again, keeping the cattle between themselves and the ridge, using animals like moving walls, a thing the West taught quick to those who survived it long. When they finally slowed, the sun was sliding toward a thin red and the wind had developed opinions about the temperature again. "We'll have company tonight," Boone said, voice gravel. "Men who like to finish what they start." Cole's jaw made a fist out of itself. "Let them come." Tala looked at him. "No," she said one more time, softer than a prayer, firmer than iron. "Let them think we are what they say. And then, when their mouths are full of the taste of it, make them swallow a different word." He studied her, really studied her, in that moment, as if he'd been trying to read a book in the dark for a week and someone had just lit a lamp. "What word?" he asked. "Witness," Tala said. "Night has its own set of laws. Some men obey them because they fear the dark, some because they trust it." Tala trusted it. She had learned when she was small that shadows are not for hiding as much as for listening, like cupping your hand to another's mouth to catch the important whispered parts. They set the herd tight in the north pasture where the ground hummed a little with spring water even under snow. Boone and Cole strung bells low on the wire where a cut would sing. Ayla took the dog and taught him where to stand where his bark would be a blade, not an echo. Tala walked the perimeter and counted her breaths by fence posts. Around midnight, the bells gave a whisper. Not a ring. Not yet. A brush of finger where a cruel hand would come next. Tala stepped sideways into the shadow of the windmill leg and stilled everything that could still. The breath. The hope. The story her mind liked to tell itself about outcomes that included laughter in the morning. She became a place for night to sit. A shape moved at the fence line, a man with a lantern hooded low and a knife cupped like a lover. Another shape ghosted behind him, the boy, tall in the worry, small in the shoulders. Tala knew them the way children know which adult will throw a stone at a dog, Saul Fitch and the boy who would one day be Saul if no one taught him the word to choose instead. Behind them, she felt more than saw two others melt across the grass like bad ideas, the heavy-footed shooter and a fourth who breathed wrong, as if his mouth had been taught to lie and now could not find truth even to save his own skin. Tala waited until Saul lifted the wire with 2 fingers, careful with a thief's care, and then let her voice move into the space between now and disaster. "Careful," she said, conversational, as if commenting on a supper oversalted. "That one bites." Saul froze. The boy's breath did a rabbit thing. The heavy foot dragged 1 inch of impatience across the dirt and the fourth man tried not to swallow loudly enough to declare he still wanted to live. Cole stepped out of the dark on the other side of the pasture with a lamp raised so the men could see the shape of what they were about to call a mistake. Boone materialized near the barn with a shotgun he held not like a threat but like a fact. Ayla stood on the porch roof with a rifle across her knees, legs dangling, smile wicked as a coyote that just stole a chicken and made a friend out of the chase. "Evening," Cole said. "You came to help with chores?" Saul's face folded into a sneer and then tried for something else and then settled on hate because it fit everywhere. "Law says." "The law left," Boone interrupted. "With its tail between its legs and dust and teeth." Saul lifted his chin. "Decker's law ain't gone." "Decker's law isn't law," Tala said. "It's a story he tells himself so he can sleep." "And what story are you telling?" Saul asked, nastiness trying to be clever. "That you're queens and we're your servants?" Tala smiled, slow, the way her grandmother did right before she beat a man at cards he didn't know she knew how to play. "That we are the river," she said. "And you are a man who has not learned to swim." Saul flicked his knife toward the wire. "I can cut a river." "Try," Tala said. The boy whispered, "Saul." "Shut up," Saul snapped, and the shut up had more fear in it than he'd meant to let out. "Listen to him," Cole said softly to the boy, as if it were just the two of them at a campfire and not at the sharp mouth of a knight about to bite. "Men don't say shut up when they're brave. They say it when they're standing on rotten boards and the creek is rising." "Enough," Saul said and slid the knife under the bottom strand. The bell kissed itself, tender and unashamed. Boone's shotgun did not move. Ayla's rifle did not waver. Cole's lamp did not shake. The heavy-footed shooter lifted his gun and found that trembling hands make poor arguments. The fourth man made a small sound and lost it, as if he could not afford even that. Tala, Cole said, and there was a warning in it, and an ask, and a respect. She moved. Not fast. Not loud. A step into lantern light so Saul could watch the face of the person he tried to turn into a thing. She did not tell him a speech. She offered him a truth sized to his mouth: walk away. He laughed, because when a person hands you a door, sometimes you have to pretend you don't know what it is. Or what? Or you stand where the water remembers, Tala said. She pointed with her chin at the herd, quiet, steady, the breath of 100 animals rising like a prayer. They know us now. They know you. They've decided where to run if running is needed. You can either watch a river decide or you can be under it when it does. Saul's eyes flicked to the herd, to Ayla, to Boone's calm old hands, to Cole, who looked like a man who had learned to be gentle for so long that if he had to be cruel it would come as a relief. The boy whispered, please, and Saul, out of pride or habit or both, chose to hear only the shape of the word and not the meaning. Cut it, Saul told himself and moved the knife. The bell rang like an altar. Ayla's rifle spoke once, the bullet sank into the dirt between Saul's boots with the certainty of a sermon. Boone's shotgun coughed, not at a man, but at the lantern, which burst like a lie told too close to the truth. Darkness rushed in, full of teeth and memory. For one breath everyone stood in a shape of silence that could have been called peace if not for the rifles that remembered their jobs too quickly. The heavy-footed shooter fired into the dark and found a fence post instead of a man. The fourth man finally found a hard swallow and choked on it. The boy ran, chose the wrong direction, tripped, and tumbled into the ditch like a last-minute change of heart. Saul lunged, and in the lunge was every ugly thing he believed and every excuse he had practiced in his mind for why the world owed him permission. He reached for Tala with his left hand, knife swinging wide with his right. Tala stepped in, not back, which is a language men like Saul almost never expect women to speak. She caught his wrist with both hands, turned the way the river turns when a stone thinks it can tell it where to go, and put him on his knees in the dust before the knife remembered which way its blade pointed. Enough, Cole said again, but this time it was not a word, it was a wall. Sheriff Crow's voice came then from the dark beyond the barn, thin, reedy, full of the breath of a man who had waited until he believed courage would not be required and then found he needed it anyway. That's enough, he repeated, struggling to make it sound like leadership and not relief. Horses clinked in the shadow, more men than Tala wanted to count stepped into the yard with lanterns held bravely high by the fearful. Saul stopped struggling when he saw the badges and the guns. Crow rode forward, eyes trying on righteousness to see if it fit. I warned you, he told Cole without looking at Tala. This has gone far enough. You're under arrest for obstruction. The girls will come with me for their safety. Ayla laughed again, tired now, through teeth that still remembered joy. Your safety? But he heard only the version of the world that made his next action easier to perform without having to carry its weight to bed. Cole's hands opened and then closed, Boone's gun tilted, the herd lifted its heads like a congregation asked an unkind question, the dog growled softly because dogs always know the taste of wrong. Tala's breath entered her chest and did not leave. Time made itself into a narrow hallway where only one thing could pass at once. The sheriff set his jaw and reached for his handcuffs. Men shifted. Lantern light licked the edges of choices like flame-tasting paper. And then, from the road, another sound. Not riders this time. Wheels. Wood. The jingle of harness. A caravan? The hair along Tala's arms lifted, an instinct older than language. She saw it first because she had been trained by a lifetime to do that, a line of wagons rolling out of night like a procession of stubborn prayers, lanterns swinging, canvas pale. At the front, a woman stood on a wagon tongue like a figurehead, dark coat, dark hat, hair black as a crow's back, eyes bright enough to be borrowed lightning. Evening, she called, voice carrying like a bell told a story to a canyon. We heard this was the place men come to learn what words mean. Cole blinked as if the world had decided to start dancing and hadn't sent invitations. Who? The woman grinned, fierce and unapologetic. "Name's Mercy Crow," she announced. "Sister of Barrett Crow, whom you folks call Sheriff. And I've brought witnesses." The sheriff's face drained like a bucket with a hole at the seam. "Mercy," he hissed through teeth, "meant to be used on meat, not family. Go home." "Home is wherever truth is being argued with knives," Mercy said. She jumped down from the wagon like a woman who trusted her ankles. "We're the women Decker's men ran off 3 farms downriver. We're here to speak the names of the hands that cut our fences, and if the sheriff is busy, we can educate him after." Saul Fitch took a step back that tried not to be a retreat and failed. The boy made a sound like a young thing remembering it still has choices. The heavy-footed shooter muttered a prayer that didn't sound like any tradition Tala knew, and the 4th man cried without making noise. Mercy Crow lifted her lantern, bright as a promise, and the flame painted the yard in a new color if possible. "Mr. Matheson," she said. "Miss Begay. Miss Begay. We came to see if the river has room for us in it too." Tala felt the world tilt in the way it does when a new door opens that the day before had been a wall. She turned to Cole. He looked at her not as a man asking what to do, but as a man standing beside someone who would know and trusting that knowing in a way that made the cold a smaller thing. The sheriff reached for his authority the way a man reaches for a coat that no longer fits and tells himself it shrank in the rain. "Everyone will stand down," he said. "This is my town." Mercy smiled and shook her head. "It's our river," she said. "And our winter. And our words." She took one step toward the lantern light, toward the center between lines men had drawn and told themselves were borders. "So, brother, what will you do when the story you've been telling meets the story that is true?" Crow raised his hand. Saul Fitch's knife turned in the dirt where Tala had put him on his knees. The herd shifted like a thundercloud preparing its throat. A wind came down the draw that smelled of snow and the iron under it. Boone breathed in, long, like a man tasting the last seconds before a fist arrives. Ayla's laughter froze on her lips and waited to hear if it had been invited to this part of the conversation. Tala stepped forward, and Mercy Crow's lantern slid her shadow long and dark across the packed earth between sheriff and sister and Saul and river, and the sheriff's fingers tightened on his pistol and Mercy took another step and Cole said her name and the dog barked once and the bells at the far fence kissed and the night, which had been polite so far, decided it had heard enough. Sheriff Crow's gun cleared leather. Sheriff Crow's gun cleared leather, and the night sucked in a breath like a lung that had been waiting to scream. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Tala saw the muzzle flash before sound found its courage. Ayla's rifle barked from the porch roof, cracking the air to throw the sheriff's pistol high. His shot went skyward, shaving a star. Mercy Crow didn't flinch. She stepped into the lantern wash as if she had prearranged a truce with bullets and would hold them to it by force of will alone. "Barrett," she said, low but clear, every syllable a finger removing a hand from a throat. "You lower that pistol. You lower that stubborn. Both of them kill men quicker than lead." The sheriff's jaw flickered with that old family anger a person wears like a passed-down coat, ill-fitting, inherited, and never once tailored to kindness. He lowered the pistol because too many eyes were in the yard and he had not chosen which ones he was willing to live with after he pulled the trigger. Saul Fitch, still on his knees where Tala had folded him, hissed like a wet fuse. "You're losing your grip, Sheriff." "Quiet," Crow snapped, and for the first time that night his voice sounded like the right tool for the work. Mercy moved among the wagons with quick, competent hands, helping women down. They were not fragile, not meek, faces wind-cured, eyes like flint that had learned how to spark without striking first. 3 carried ledgers under their arms, one bore a tin strongbox, another a folded map. Tala felt a strange relief spread through her ribs. Witnesses, yes, but also record keepers, the kind who understood that men who refused to hear testimony sometimes learn to read it when the page is shoved under their nose with enough force. Cole stepped to Tala's shoulder, palm briefly finding the small of her back as if to check he still had a world with her in it. Boone took the porch steps one at a time, old knees calculating risk like accountants. Mercy faced the yard. We're not here to start a fight, she said. We're here to have one. Properly. In the open. With names. With dates. With the shape of the harm drawn so true even a man who lives by crooked lines can see it. She lifted the ledger. Elias Decker's men cut our fences. They drove our stock with torches. They left notes with the sheriff's seal and charcoal, threats poured into official vessels so the poison would drink sweet. We will say it plain and sign our names. The law can arrest truth, but it cannot make it lie. Something in Sheriff Crow's face loosened and then hardened again, the way ice breaks and refreezes when the night refuses to make up its mind. You do not come to a man's yard at midnight and declare a court, he said. There is a place for this. This is the place, Mercy answered. Because this is where the river has been asked to change its name. She turned. Mr. Matheson, Cole, do you consent to your porch being our witness stand until morning? Cole's hand left Tala's back but not her gravity. I consent, he said. I'd consent twice if that made it stronger. Boone snorted. And I'll make coffee that could wake the dead so nobody dozes while the truth works. Ayla swung her legs and wrapped them lightly against the porch roof. Proceedings, then. But if anyone points a gun instead of a finger, I will rearrange the order of events. Men shifted. Lanterns flared higher as if they too wanted to see better. The herd breathed, heavy and unanimous. Sheriff Crow hesitated, then holstered his pistol with a care that said he'd spend the rest of the night arguing with the pocket that held it. Mercy took the porch like a judge who knew she was only borrowing the title from something larger. Right, Hetty, she told a woman with ink-stained fingers. And, Sheriff, if you leave, everyone in this yard will know you are allergic to daylight. Stay, and you might discover your oath still fits. Hetty sat on the top step, opened her ledger to a blank page, and dipped her pen. The scratch of nib on paper sounded like a saw beginning its honest work. Name, Mercy said to the first woman. Rose Harper, the woman answered, voice steady. Dry Knife Ridge. South Pasture. 1 month passed, Saul Fitch and 2 men with him cut fence in the night. They lit a rag on a stick and waved it to turn our cattle. My boy saw them from the hayloft. He knows faces. Sheriff, he came to town. He gave names. You were not in. A deputy took our complaint like he was taking medicine for someone else's sickness. Nothing changed. Saul's mouth emptied of spit. Lies. Mercy flicked him a glance that could skin a rabbit. We will get to your turn. She nodded to Hetty. Right, Saul Fitch denies. Leave room for him to sign his denial. The second woman stepped forward. Ellen Rusk. Decker's men dumped lie in our well. We found their tracks, 3 sets, one with a turned right foot. They left a paper, Sheriff Barrett Crow advises you relocate boundaries for peace. Sheriff, your name was on it. Crow's eyes flashed. My name was forged. Or borrowed. Or stolen. I didn't write that. The words came quick, uncooked. Tala watched them steam in the cold and wondered if they would grow skin or wither in the wind. Mercy's chin dipped. Then say so here. Put your hand to the ledger and swear it under your sister's witness and the river's. Crow stared at the page like it held a mirror. Slowly, as if the motion hurt, he took the pen Hetty offered. He signed, Barrett Crow. The ink looked too black on the pale line, stark as guilt. I did not write any such note, he said, louder now, as if to hear the words and test their weight in the yard's air. And if any man uses my name to push widows off water, he will meet my badge without my forgiveness in it. Saul laughed without humor. You'll forgive plenty if Decker asks nice. You always do. Mercy's eyes cut to him. You're next. Stand up, Saul Fitch. Tell your truth if you trust it. He stayed on his knees because pride had glued him there. I cut fence that was strung onto Decker land, he said. We took back what was his. Decker land by what deed? Hetty asked without looking up. By deed of fear and purchase, Saul said. Same way any man holds ground out here. Then fear will be stripped and purchase examined, Mercy said. Because both look different in daylight. Cole shifted his weight. Where's Decker? Coming, Saul said, and smiled the way a man does when he decides to watch a storm hit a house he doesn't live in. He's bringing the paper that will make all your noble mouths pucker sour. Boone reappeared with mugs that steamed like chimneys. He handed one to Tala, one to Cole, one to Mercy last. Coffee, he said. Black as a preacher's shoe. He passed one to the sheriff as a test of his capacity to accept unearned kindness. Crow took it, stared into it, and drank like a man gulping a map he hoped would tell him where to go next. They took statements until Frost turned lamps into small suns. Names, dates, insults engraved into doors, cattle counts, boys who had grown men's eyes overnight. Tala watched the narrative braid itself, not a single cord strong enough to pull a wagon, but many, and together they could drag a stubborn truth into motion. She scanned the edges of the yard for movement out of place. The boy, Saul's shadow, hovered near the fence line, arrow wound bandaged in pride wearing a thin coat. He noticed her looking, squared his shoulders as if to be bigger inside his own name, and then looked away when he realized he could not. Mercy closed the ledger when the last woman finished and the page sighed with ink. Sheriff Crow, she said. Your office opens at sunup. We'll be there with copies and witnesses even if this yard work were all a fever dream. But it isn't. Now, she faced Saul. Fetch your master if he's already on the road, or give him this, daylight is the river's friend. If he wants to argue with water, he'd better come with something more than threats wearing a suit. Saul smirked. He doesn't come. You go to him. I prefer my feet clean, Mercy replied. He can track where we've been by the wet stone we leave. Mercy, Crow said, a warning and a plea. Don't make this worse. I'm not making it anything, she said. I'm measuring it. You're the law, be a scale that doesn't tilt when a rich man breathes on it. Tala felt, for a heartbeat, the oddest camaraderie with Mercy Crow. Different rivers, same current, a refusal to let men bend the world at the neck just because they've always done it. The bells along the wire kissed again, soft, speculative. Ayla stiffened on the roof. Boone's shotgun moved infinitesimally to cover the dark beyond the corral. Cole set his mug down with a minimal clink. The sheriff's hand twitched toward his holster, then away, like a man who knows his instincts are loud but not always correct. Hoofbeats, slow and expensive, sifted through frost. Elias Decker came as if the land had been paved for him. He rode a bay gelding so glossy the knight had to find new black to paint it. Men flanked him with rifles at their saddles and the moral understanding of a hired glove. Decker wore a coat that knew it was a coat and a smile that thought it was law. His beard was neat, his boots were dirty on purpose. He tipped his hat to Mercy and then to Crow as if tipping satisfied debts. Well, he said, voice like oil in cold water, smooth, unmixing. Isn't this a tableau? Citizens awake past their bedtimes. Ladies playing clerk. Sheriff attending their theater. His eyes slid to Tala and Ayla. He tucked them into a category and shut the lid. I don't recognize and their role in this. Witnesses, Mercy said before Tala could answer. Bridges. The reason the river hasn't turned red while you measured it with your wallet. Decker's smile did not change. Charming. He dismounted with an athlete's grace and a banker's entitlement, removed a parcel from his saddlebag, and untied a ribbon with the ease of a man unwrapping other people's property. Here, he said, holding up parchments with seals. Territorial filings. Surveyor's maps. Water rights adjudicated by men whose names matter. This is not a herd of grievances you can drive into my yard and call justice. Mercy didn't reach for the papers. We'll read, she said. Then you'll listen. I seldom do both in the same morning, Decker replied, handing the sheaf to Sheriff Crow instead. You are the proper channel, Barrett. Crow took the papers. His eyes moved. Tala watched his mouth set. She could not read what he read, but she could read the man trying to read it, calculation, frustration, an old injury flaring called duty. You annexed Dry Knife's south slope by legal subdivision, he said slowly. But the river isn't a subdivision. And the notes you sent? I sent nothing, Decker said. Saul? Saul lifted both hands as far as his pride allowed. Workers got overzealous. You ordered it, Mercy said. And if I did, Decker replied mildly, who will prove it? Your ledgers? Stories told by women at midnight on a ranch I intend to own by spring? He smiled with all the white his mother had paid a dentist to keep. Bring your tales to town. We'll have a hearing. And by we I mean men in coats behind tables, not porch sermons with coffee. Tala moved one pace, enough to feel the river's weight in her bones, enough to let her breath lift the hair at her temple and cool it. The river is here, she said. So are we. So is your man's knife. So are his tracks. And so is a boy who has not yet decided which name to grow into. She nodded toward Saul's shadow. He flinched and looked at Decker as if the older man might change the weather by frowning at it. Decker's gaze flicked over the boy and discarded him. Children are poor witnesses, he said. They confuse fear with memory. Then let him speak to both, Mercy said. Sometimes fear teaches truer than comfort. Decker reached for geniality like a revolver. My dear, he said. I commend your spirit. But property law ends at the water, Cole said, and his voice sounded like a man who had read a book with his hands and found the pages written under his skin. You can frame documents as fences, Mr. Decker. The river will eat them. We're deciding here whether the river eats quietly or loudly. Decker's face cooled. This is your choice then, sell. Take my very good price. Remove this theater from your porch. The water can be managed. If you sell, you buy me the right to manage it. My mother, Cole said, taught me you don't buy rights. You borrow responsibilities. They don't come cheap and they don't come clean. Decker's men shifted, bored with parables and hungry for tasks. The sheriff folded the papers and handed them back like he'd touched something warm and didn't know where to put the heat. You'll bring these to town at sunup, he said, voice stiff with decision chosen in part to end a conversation. There'll be a hearing. Decker smiled, and something in it made Tala's knuckles ache. As you wish. He tipped his hat to Mercy again. Try to get some sleep, sister of law. You'll need it to carry the disappointment. He turned to go, then paused, eyes traveling one more time over Tala and Ayla and stopping on Tala's bow. You shoot? Yes, Tala said. At men? At lies, she answered. Ah, Decker said softly. Then we are all in danger. He swung into the saddle and rode out, his men following in the slow, confident cadence of a clock convinced it sets the hours. When their dust unclenched, the yard was left with that hollow a human presence leaves, noise gone, intent lingering like a stain holding its shape. Mercy rested her ledger on her hip and blew warmth into her cupped hands. We go at first light, she said. All of us. The river will sit in the front row. Crow nodded, then hesitated as if a word caught between duty and habit. Mercy, he said, be careful. She softened, just there, just long enough to show that family still had threads even when men wrapped law around the loom. I'm fresh out of careful, she said. I'll be exact instead. Sleep came in shards and none of them smooth. Tala lay on the floor by the stove at Ayla's shoulder, both still wearing boots and knives because comfort is a country a woman leaves with reluctance when men roam its borders with papers and guns. She tried to let the night knead the knots from her muscles, but thoughts kept walking, of Decker's smile and Mercy's ledger and the boy with fear sprouting in him like a winter weed he didn't plant. She must have dozed. She woke to the dog's low talk and a sound a woman learns before she learns her own laughter, a footstep trying too hard to be a shadow. Ayla's hand slid into Tala's with an old, wordless readiness. They rose together, soft and sudden, barefoot now, knives quiet. The stove ticked. Outside, frost thought about blooming. Tala eased the door open and breathed night. Two shapes detached from the barn and moved toward the porch steps. Not Decker's men, their arrogance had a gait. These crept. She and Ayla slipped around, hugging the wall like they were part of a story the house told itself to stay brave. The first man reached the steps and froze with a gasp when he found an old shotgun staring down its long black throat at him. Boone stood like a gravestone carved from mule stubborn. "I was born tired," he said. "Don't make me die busy." The second shape turned to run and smacked into Tala's knife. She let him feel the flat against his breastbone, let the reality of it travel through his coat and into his heart like a message delivered in person. "Lower," she whispered. "Slow." He did. He was young, younger than she'd hoped and older than she'd wished. The boy. Saul's shadow. Up close he looked like someone who'd been practicing at swagger and kept breaking it in the wash. "Jesse," he blurted. "My name's Jesse." He seemed ashamed to have given the truth to the dark without bargaining first. "Why are you here, Jesse?" Tala asked. He swallowed. "To warn you," he said, rapid, as if speed might outrun cowardice. "Decker ain't going to the hearing. He's going to the damn cut. He'll throw dynamite at the canyon above your north draw. Says if the water runs wide, it'll drown your calves and take your fence with it. Says a flood moves a boundary better than a pen." The cold put a hand on Tala's spine and pressed. Ayla cursed as softly as a prayer. Boone's shotgun did not blink. "He sent you to do it?" Tala asked. Jesse shook his head. "Sent Saul. I followed. Didn't want him to look back and see me, but I couldn't stand in the bunk while he took the river and made it a weapon for him." He lifted his chin, which trembled. "I don't like being a weapon for men who don't even know my name." "Good," Tala said, a small ember of gratitude warming her tone. "Where?" "Up canyon." He pointed. 2 miles. He's got 3 cases. He'll set at first light. Says the sheriff will be busy escorting papers to town." Boone muttered something about devils and schedules. Ayla was already tying her braid back with a band of leather. "We leave now," she said. "We take the faster way. We teach Saul that the river remembers fools and the women who stopped them." Cole came onto the porch, buckling his holster. Mercy followed, boots on, ledger under her arm like a talisman that now had to double as a shield. Crow appeared last, sleep creases in his face as if honesty had wrinkled him overnight. He looked at Jesse, at Boone's gun, at the knife at Jesse's breastbone. "Son," Crow said. "You just undid 6 months of bad choices in one sentence. Keep saying ones like that." Jesse swallowed and nodded, eyes bright with something that had the shape of relief but stung like grief as it entered him. Cole looked at Tala. "Your call." She did not need to think. "Ayla, Boone, Jesse with me," she said. "We go high along the pinyon shelf, faster, quiet. Cole, you take Mercy and the women to town now. Put the ledger in daylight. Sheriff, you choose, river or courthouse. But choose." Crow's face arranged itself around the decision. "Ledger," he said. "But I'm sending deputies to your trail." "Send the ones who don't shoot at shadows when they get nervous," Ayla said. Jesse's chin had steadied. "I can guide you," he said to Tala. "I know where Saul sleeps when he's waiting for morning." He looked so young then, so painfully, truthfully unarmored. Tala wanted to put a hand to his cheek and remind herself that boys are just new men who haven't yet decided what their scars will say about them. "Guide," she said. "And don't run." They moved quickly, saddles thrown without ceremony, hooves muffled with rags so the night wouldn't gossip. The pinyon shelf hugged the canyon like a secret only deer told. Frost crusted the needles, every step sounded like glass being persuaded to pretend it was grass. A pale seam opened in the east when they reached the bend above the dam cut. The river below ran tight and fast, pinched by stone into a voice that never got to finish a sentence. Tala slid from Little Star and crouched at the lip. Below, like men trying to steal from God while he slept, Saul Fitch and 2 others worked by a hooded lantern. The dynamite cases lay open, red cylinders neat as insults. Saul's breath smoked. "Hurry," he said. "I want to be riding while the water argues with the math." One of the men, heavy-footed from the ridge, if Tala's bones remembered right, muttered about fuses and mistakes. The third man was the fourth from the yard, the one whose swallow had finally found purchase. He looked ill. He also looked like a man who had agreed to something when he was proud and found himself small in the cold. "Boone," Tala whispered. "Cover the left." The old man nodded, moving with that surprising, stealthy grace men get when their bones have learned to convince their bodies of an old truth: you don't need to be fast if you're sure. "Ayla," Tala said. "You circle. If they run, herd them up the bank." "And you?" Ayla asked, small smile that had no humor and all courage. "I talk," Tala said. She stood, because sometimes the river needs a person to be tall for it. She slid down the bank with controlled speed, loose stones whispering her approach. Saul spun, hand going to his gun, then stopping when he saw a woman and underestimated what that meant for the outcome of his morning. "You can set that," Tala said, nodding at the dynamite. "You can light it. You can ride away and tell yourself you didn't throw the first stone because it already existed in the canyon when you found it. But when the water comes and takes calves and fences and the bones of the coyote pups tucked under that root up there, it will pass through a story shaped like your name." She stepped closer. "Every time you close your eyes, Saul Fitch, every night you try to sleep after mixing grief with water, you will hear it. Your name, sliding under doors, under lids, under skin." He lifted his chin. "You think I scare?" "No," Tala said. "I think you pretend you don't. Pretending is louder than fear. The water will learn your truth." He sneered to cover the way his mouth wanted to tremble. "You going to preach it out of me?" "I'm going to give you a choice," she said. "Same as the boy you drag around like a mirror you refuse to look at just gave you: walk away from being a weapon, or become what the river will refuse to forgive." He jerked his head at the heavy-footed man. "Light it." The man fumbled with the fuse and a match. Boone's shotgun announced its opinion with a single bark. The match flew into the river and died hissing, a small, satisfied sound. Ayla appeared on the rim above, silhouette sharp against the pale seam of morning. "Next match costs a finger," she called. Saul swore, grabbed a stick of dynamite, and lit it from the lantern, too fast, too angry. His hands betrayed him with the clumsiness rage always rents on a man's fine motor skills. He froze, fuse spitting, and for one crystalline instant Tala saw every potential future braided in the air: the throw, the flood, the calves, the ledger turned into a list of the dead, or the drop, the sudden red snow, the small explosion that ends only the hand that held harm. She stepped in, not to him but to the moment, and closed her fingers over his wrist. Not hard. Not a wrench. A presence. "Decide with the part of you that will outlive this morning," she said. Saul looked at her, and under all the ugliness he had stacked against ever having to take instruction from a woman's mouth, she found a boy's bewilderment he had never been allowed to name. The fuse burned toward his thumb like time's parody. Ayla raised her rifle but didn't fire. Boone didn't breathe. Saul dropped the stick. He kicked snow over the fuse with a choked noise halfway between a sob and a curse. The heavy-footed man sagged as if someone had taken a sack of rocks off his back. The other man cried, this time with sound. "Good," Tala said, voice gentled by relief even as a tremor ran her wrist. "Now take the rest and throw them in the river, one by one, without fuses." Saul hesitated. "Decker?" "Won't bleed when a calf does," Boone said from the rocks, making his presence known with all the subtlety of a sunrise. "But he'll cut you for getting blood on his sleeve. Decide who you're willing to get cut for." Jesse slid down the bank then, feet skidding, face pale and brave. "Don't, Saul," he said. "Please. I'm tired of standing behind your choices and pretending they were mine." Saul stared at him like a man seeing a reflection that didn't lie. Slowly, as if he were moving through syrup made of shame, he picked up the other sticks and tossed them into the river. They bobbed, red and ridiculous, then spun away into the canyon's throat and toward a sea none of them would ever see but needed to believe in anyway. Ayla exhaled. "Now the fuses," she called. "Feed them to the water too." Give the river string. It'll knit a net to catch the next bad idea you have. They did. The lantern burned low and guttered. The canyon brightened a shade. Birds made uncertain comments about the day. Tala let go Saul's wrist and stepped back. You will come to town, she said. You will tell the hearing you set charges and changed your mind. You will sign Mercy Crow's ledger. You will speak Decker's name at the mouth of your truth. Saul's jaw tensed. He'll kill me. Only if you keep working for him, Ayla said. He never shoots men who stop being useful. He just forgets them. Let him forget you into a life where the river doesn't have to say your name at night. Saul looked at Jesse, at the heavy-footed man, at the crying one. He nodded, once, the kind of nod that closes a door a little too hard because any softer and it might swing back open. They reached town as the sun climbed a hand's width and breathed thin gold into the frost. Holbrook was a line of buildings that believed they were a city and would fight you for saying otherwise. The courthouse sat lean and formal at the end of the main street like a schoolmarm with opinions about posture. Women filled its steps, Mercy's wagons had beat them there, and rumor had outrun the wagons and put chairs in the aisle for itself. Men gathered too, some curious, some irritated at having their morning coffee salted with other people's trouble. Sheriff Crow stood at the doors with two deputies whose hands hovered near holsters not because they meant to draw, but because fear likes to feel prepared even when it has not yet learned how to be brave. Inside, a judge with a mustache like a broom called the room to order and tried to look larger than the story that had already decided to be bigger than him. Mercy sat to one side, ledger open, heady ready with copies. Cole stood behind her like a fence post plants itself where it's needed and does not ask to be thanked for growing there. Boone and the boys fit their shoulders into a back bench where Stubborn belonged. Tala entered with Ayla and Jesse and Saul and their two accomplices, and a stir ran through the room the way wind runs through wheat, visible, soft, and unstoppable. State your business, the judge said. He had cleaned his spectacles for the occasion and put dirt back on them with his expression. Mercy rose. We are here to demand the law recognize an old fact, she said. That water is life and cannot be treated as if it were rope to tie around a widow's neck. Elias Decker claims papers. We bring truth. Truth signs names too. Decker was already seated with his attorney, a man so thin even his smile looked malnourished. Decker's eyes glinted when Saul took a place near the front instead of hiding at the back. Ayla took the aisle seat between Saul and the door, a placement Tala admired, protection and constraint in one chair. The judge adjusted his mustache. We will proceed with order, he said. He nodded to Decker's attorney. You first. The man stood and made sounds that were technically words but had all the flavor of boiled paper. My client holds title by territorial grant, he intoned. He has subdivided under statute. He has posted notices properly pursuant to, he named numbers as if invoking saints. Mercy didn't sit, she simply raised her ledger. We have names, she said. We have sworn statements. We have the sheriff's denial of forged notes. We have a boy and 3 men who will testify they were ordered to cut and flood. The judge blinked. Flood? Dynamite at the dam cut, Boone said from the back, helpful as a shout. We untangled it from their mourning. Order, the judge barked, but the word had less authority than Mercy's quiet. He studied Saul, who had not stopped swallowing since he Saturday step up, the judge said. Tell the truth and measure it by the weight hitting your tongue. Saul stood. His boots seemed too heavy for the floor. He took the oath like it was a burn he'd decided to keep. I cut fences, he said. I took notes to women with the sheriff's name on them. Decker ordered it with his mouth. Sometimes he ordered it with a grin and a hint, but I'm not stupid. The hint was the order. Decker's lawyer rose. Objection. Hearsay. No document speaks this lie. Mercy lifted the ledger a little higher. Here's a document, she said. Signed just now. The judge scratched his mustache with a pen. Objection noted and overruled until I find a better word for this mess. He turned to Decker. Mr. Decker, you will respond. Decker rose like a curtain lifted by a bored stagehand. I sympathize with hardship, he said, voice perfumed for company. But progress is not the villain here. Cows die. Fences fail. Rivers flood. If my men overstepped, they will be disciplined. But this theater of accusation does not move title from my hand to anyone else's. Floods, Tala said before the judge could caution her. You were going to make one. Decker's gaze found her and held as if he could turn her into paper with attention and then set her on a desk. I find it unfortunate that certain elements have been allowed to insert themselves into civic discourse. Elements, Ayla said, amused despite rage. That's a new word for women. Jesse stood like a sapling learning wind. I was there, he said, voice young and brave enough to hush the room. Saul was going to blow the cut. I followed him to try to stop it. These women did. He gestured at Tala and Ayla and then, in a motion that surprised even himself, put a palm flat over his heart as if to keep it from climbing out. I don't want to work for men who make me a mistake I can't take back. Decker's lawyer sighed, the sigh of a man expressing superior boredom in the hope it would become contagious. Boy, he said, do you have any proof? Jesse looked at his bandaged shoulder and then at Tala. Yes, he said. Me. A murmur. Mercy smiled in a way that took no joy and offered all of it. Sometimes the only receipt is a soul, she said softly. The judge rubbed his temples. The court will recess, he said. 15 minutes. I need to remind myself what the law is for. The room erupted into the sound of people discussing how reality should be edited. Decker stepped close to Sheriff Crow while the judge retreated. Mercy stepped closer too, ledger still open, as if daring Decker to dump it like water and watch the ink run into something new that would still spell his name. Barrett, Decker murmured. You cannot let this improvisation continue. Control your room. Crow's eyes were steadier than at midnight. If my name was used to move women off water, he said, I'll control that first. Decker's smile went thin as a blade. You are making an enemy of progress. I'm remembering my sister, Crow said. She writes clearer than your lawyer. Decker's gaze slid to Tala, then passed her shoulder to the door. His men stepped aside as a new figure entered, a slight woman in a gray coat, hair braided and coiled tight, a child at her skirt. She had the look of someone who had been hungry long enough that full frightened her. She scanned the room, found Decker, and went white with that special anger the poor keep for the rich who used to be poor and forgot it. Mr. Decker, she said, voice almost mild. My husband drowned in your ditch last spring. A crackle of quiet. Decker's lawyer stiffened. Madam, this is not. Mercy's palm went up without touching anything. Let her finish, she said. The woman took a step. You promised wages you didn't pay while the ditch was dug. You kept back water till papers were signed. He went to open the gate on a night you made him work past safe. He fell. The current kept him. You sent me $5 and a note that said, it happens. I brought the note. She pulled a crumpled slip from her coat and smoothed it flat with hands that shook. Mercy reached and took it like a priest receiving a confession. Decker's face arranged itself into something that could be mistaken for sorrow and poor light. Accidents are tragedies, he said. We have all suffered them. Some of us caused them, Mercy said, reading the note out loud so the words sat in the room like bricks. It happens. Decker's signature below like a man smirking on paper. Crow's hand went to the back of a chair and stayed there, as if the wood's steadiness could transfer into his palm. The judge returned just then and walked into the room like a man who had decided if he could not be taller he would at least be heavier. This court recognizes the river as shared resource, he said without sitting. Preliminary injunction, no party to these proceedings, not Decker, not Matheson, will touch the cut or dam or gates until further order. Sheriff, see it enforced. As for forged notices, this court directs an immediate inquiry. Into the matter of cut fences and threatened floods, I'm convening a jury tomorrow. He banged his gavel so hard it surprised him. Get me 12 people who understand hunger. Decker's lawyer rose to protest. The judge glared him into grammar errors. Denied, he said to anything the man might have asked. Mr. Decker, you will keep your men home tonight. If I hear so much as a bell whisper on the Matheson fence, I will fine you so hard the territory will feel flush. Decker inclined his head, a king pretending to be a subject. He turned to go, and found his path blocked by Jesse, who had stepped without meaning to or with more meaning than he knew. Move, boy, Decker said softly. Jesse did not. His hands shook, but his feet stuck. No, he said. Not this time. Decker's eyes chilled. You're fired. Jesse laughed, a short, shocked sound. I quit, he said, discovering the sentence as it left his mouth and liking how it fit his teeth. Mercy's ledger snapped shut like a verdict. That's one, she said to the room. There will be more. They spilled onto the street like a river choosing a new bed. Snow, fine as dust, began to fall from a sky the color of old tin. The herd back at Crow's Mercy would need eyes and hands and song before dusk. The injunction lay like fresh paint on the town's air. Tala could smell men testing it already. Cole moved close to her and spoke from the place where words are made to be shared in thin air. I keep thinking, he said, of your father's price. His daughters as witnesses. We're learning the exchange rate, Tala said. Hard work, hard words. Worth it, he asked. She looked at the courthouse windows, where her reflection stood with Mercy's ledger ghosted over her chest. Ask me after spring, she said. When the river answers. Ayla tugged her sleeve. We need to ride, she said. Saul's repentance won't feed calves. And Decker has men who love disobedience more than pay. They were at the hitch rail when a boy ran up, a different boy, hatless, breath stitching the cold. Miss Mercy, he gasped. Fire wagon, somebody cut the harness at the firehouse. Mayor says it was vandals. But Mr. Decker's men was seen laughing near there and, he gulped air. I heard one say, let their barn burn and see how righteous they talk then. Mercy's face went very still. Which barn? Matheson, the boy said. Crow's Mercy. Tala's heart sprinted and then refused to stop. The barn was where the medicine lay, the hay, the tack, the winter's ability to be survived without begging. She didn't think. She was on her horse and flying before her mind could remind her how many things could not be saved. Cole was beside her, Ayla too, Boone somewhere behind, swearing at his knees with love. Mercy mounted a borrowed gelding like a woman who had always kept her hands honest. Sheriff Crow threw himself into the saddle with a curse that contained prayer and galloped as if an oath were a set of spurs. The road to Crow's Mercy unrolled too slow. Smoke lifted on the horizon, a ribbon first, then a fist. Tala tasted creosote and memory and fear, all speaking in the same tongue. The wind was wrong for Mercy. It pushed the smoke toward the house like a suggestion someone ugly wanted to become a rumor. They topped the last rise and saw it, the barn lit from within like a mouth with hell behind its teeth. Flames lit the rafters and chose them. The bells on the south fence were ringing, wild, dissonant, as if the wire had decided to sing for the dead before anyone did. Davin and Luke were a line of buckets. Boone yanked the well rope hand over hand like he could draw enough water out to drown sin. The old dog barked hoarse, trying to herd fire like it was a wayward calf. Hayloft. Ayla shouted, pointing. There. A small shape moved in the smoke, a calf, separated and crying, no, two, no, Tala's stomach dropped. A third, legs tangled in a fallen rake. Cole threw himself through the side door without waiting for permission. Tala wanted to curse him for that. She didn't. She went. The heat grabbed her cheeks with both hands. Smoke braided itself into her hair in an instant. She dropped low, counted breath by boards, and followed his silhouette up the ladder. The loft was a world where orange had killed every other color. Cole already had one calf in the crook of his arm like an absurd, precious bundle. He kicked a path clear and shoved the animal into Tala's hands, then dove for the second. A beam cracked. It sounded like a promise about to be broken. Tie them and drop, Tala said, throw raw. She looped a rope around the first calf's middle and lowered. The animal spun, bleated, landed, scrambled toward air. She coughed and tasted iron. Cole grabbed the third calf and then froze, eyes fixed on the back wall. "What?" she hacked. He pointed. Through flame-framed boards, Tala saw shapes, two men, running along the fence line, tossing something that flared into the hay as it sailed. "Oil," Cole said. They soaked the stacks. One of the men turned. Even through heat waves, Tala knew Saul's heavy-footed accomplice. "Go," she said. "Now." They slithered down the ladder with the last calf. The roof groaned, then screamed. Boone and Mercy were a machine with buckets. Ayla was a corridor cut through smoke, pushing animals out with slaps and insults. Sheriff Crow yelled orders hoarse. For a dizzy, bright second Tala thought they might beat it. Then a gust took the east wall, fed flame with that wicked oxygen joy. Fire ran up the boards like laughter, free and ugly. The roof listed. "Out!" Cole roared. "Everybody, out!" The roof fell. Not all at once, the barn was too stubborn to die without causing argument. A triangle of it came down first, trapping Cole between a sea of sparks and a beam that pinned his coat. Tala saw it happen and moved before sense could protest. She dove, shoved, shouldered the beam. Her back was not a lever built for this, but anger and fear in the river combined and made her spine a thing she didn't know it was. The beam lifted a finger width, enough. Cole yanked free, jacket smoking. He pushed her toward daylight. They came out coughing death. Air was a blade and a bomb. Mercy seized Tala's shoulders, shook her once, checking with hands for the injuries eyes missed. Crow dragged Cole to a trough and shoved his head in like baptism. Boone sat down because his knees had enough. The barn roared itself empty of structure. In its place, a skeleton of black and the small, awful sounds of things that had not been saved. Davin sobbed once, one aloud, then set his jaw. Luke leaned into Boone's side and tried not to die standing up. Tala's lungs fought. She stared at the fence line where she had seen men. The bells there had gone from song to silence. The snow that had begun in town now hissed on hot timber and died in small, desperate puffs. "Sheriff," Mercy said, voice like flint striking. "Find them." Crow nodded once, and deputies peeled off at a gallop, anger for once clean in their wake. Cole rose from the trough like a man hauled from a second birth. He saw the ruin and let it into his eyes because he had given himself that rule long ago: never pretend a hurt is smaller, it grows teeth in the dark. He turned to Tala. "You saved my life," he said simply. "You're not through paying for the horse yet," she said, and it was a joke and an oath and a prayer in one breath. He almost smiled. "Fair." His gaze moved to the house, still unburned, and then to the north pasture. The herd huddled, scared but present. "We rebuild." "We do," Tala said, throat sanded raw. Mercy moved among the women and boys in Boone, placing hands, placing tasks, knitting a net out of competence. "Hetty," she called, "we'll need a list." "What's gone?" "What's needed?" "Ledgers for the living too," Hetty said, eyes red, pen ready. A shout from the south fence. One deputy waved his hat. They had someone. The heavy-footed man, the one who had almost lit the fuse, stumbled between them, face blistered by the burn of near fire and bad choices. Crow stood him in the yard. "Name," he said. "Walt Hobbs," the man panted. "I didn't," Saul said. He swallowed. "He said it'd be like lightning. Like nature." He sagged. "I'm tired of men who think nature is proof they're innocent." Tala stepped close enough he had to look at her or be obviously a coward. "Where's Saul?" she asked. Hobbs lifted a shaking hand. "Toward the river. Said if we drew the sheriff here, Decker would take the cut anyway." Boone swore a benediction and a curse together. "Decker's too rich to obey an injunction," he said. "Too sure of his weather." Cole looked to Tala. She looked to the north, to the canyon, to where the river ran with its throat in a narrow fist. The thought of Decker there with dynamite sat in her chest like a stone. Then then became a blade. "We ride," she said. Mercy put the ledger in Hetty's hands. "Finish counting what you can," she told her. "We'll go count a man." She turned to Sheriff Crow. "Brother." He met her eyes. "I know," he said. "If this is true," he didn't finish. "There are sentences the law only learns how to say while galloping." They mounted again, Smoke and Snow both trying to brand the day with their names. Boone stayed. Someone had to, someone always does. Davin and Luke took buckets to the house because sometimes the only way to grow up is to carry water while people ride to pick a fight with your future. The canyon mouth yawned. Wind came out of it, sharp as warnings. The river's voice rose, insistent, a language anyone can learn if they stop trying to translate it into coin. Hoofbeats echoed off stone. A hawk wrote anxious cursive above them. They saw him before he saw them, Decker on the shelf above the cut, coat flapping, hat tied down, two men with cases at his feet. He moved with impatience and the softness of someone unused to lifting anything heavier than paper that made other people lift for him. The men fussed with caps and wick, one kept glancing at the injunction folded in his pocket as if paper might transform into armor if you touched it often enough. Sheriff Crow raised his hand. "By order of this court," he began. Decker lit a fuse. "Don't," Mercy shouted, voice ricocheting, "Elias." He didn't look. He never had, not really, not at anything that would refuse to turn into the shape he needed it to be. He threw the first stick toward the seam of rock where water made itself thin. Tala kicked Little Star. The mare leapt as if she had been waiting years to be asked to outrun a bad decision. Tala rose in the stirrups, drew, and released in one motion. The arrow flashed, pure as an idea that refuses compromise, and struck the fuse in the air. Sparks showered out and died like foolish promises. The dynamite bounced, dull and spent, into the river below. Decker turned then, stunned into human. He drew a pistol, not because it would help but because sometimes men require metal to make their hands feel like intention again. Cole fired, not at Decker, but at the second stick as it rose from a hired hand's throw. The bullet kissed the wick, the fuse coughed and went dumb. The stick smacked the rock and slid into the water like a sulky child being sent to bathe. The third man, more frightened of breaking Decker's order than dying of its completion, scrambled for another stick with a shaking hand. Ayla's shot took the cap clean off before he could seat it. Mercy and Crow fanned to either side, voices issuing commands that sounded not like theater but like weather. "You obey because it is bigger than you." Decker stared at Tala as if she had violated a contract he believed he had with the universe. "That wasn't your decision to make," he said. She lowered her bow. "The river disagreed," she said. "It asked me to borrow its voice." He lifted the pistol. Sheriff Crow's gun barked a warning shot that sent chips of limestone into Decker's cheek. "Drop it," Crow said. "Or I will drop you." For the first time since midnight, Elias Decker hesitated in a way that let truth into the room. He did not know which was safer, clinging to power or surrendering to consequence. He chose to aim, not at Crow, not at Tala, but at the dynamite box, in a spiteful calculus. If he could not have the flood, no one could have safety near it. Tala saw the choice coalesce and might have beaten him to it if the ground had not moved under her horse as if the canyon decided to shrug. A rumble, deep, older than men and their paper, rolled through stone. For a timeless, breathless sliver, everyone looked at everyone else like thieves caught in a mirror. Something gave way high up the wall. A slab of rock, loosened by years and argument, tore free with a roar, not at the cut but above where Decker stood. He looked up, eyes wide with the novelty of something larger refusing his timetable. "Elias!" Mercy screamed. And the world dropped a piece of itself toward him. The ledge buckled. Decker stumbled, arms pinwheeling, guns skittering away. His men scattered in that unholy dance cowards do when they realize they are mortal. Crow spurred forward, Cole kicked, Tala's bow dropped from her hand as she drove Little Star at the sliding boulder even though that made no kind of sense to anyone except someone who had decided that fear could take a seat. The stone slammed down where Decker had been a heartbeat earlier, smashing the edge of the shelf and shearing it to a new, ugly straight. Decker lay on his belly, one arm over the cut, fingers clawing empty air, boots seeking purchase on pebbles that had decided loyalty was optional. The pistol vanished over the lip and kite down into the water. He made a sound Tala had not expected to hear from a man so certain of his indestructibility, childhood, unpracticed and terrified. "Don't move," Crow shouted, sliding out of the saddle and belly crawling to the edge. "I've got you." "Barrett." Decker gasped, and the name was huge with a history neither of them wanted to discuss in front of other people. "Don't let." His feet slipped, his body shifted, the river below muttered greedily, "Not evil, just itself." Cole locked his hands around Crow's belt. Mercy flung herself flat and reached, fingers long as intention, face a map of fury drawn on Mercy. Tala swung out of the saddle and slammed her palm against rock, anchoring herself against the canyon's new opinion. Decker's fingers caught Crow's wrist. For a 6-second, physics paused in a thought experiment. Tala held breath. Ayla hissed a prayer between teeth. Jesse arrived at a run from the trail behind, skidding to his knees, eyes rounder than sense. The hired men hovered, unsure whether loyalty would be rewarded by repayment or firing squads at sunrise. "Elias," Mercy said, voice steady as a rope. "Look at me." He did. He did because men can't help but do what Mercy says when her eyes look like that, a ledger you can't argue with because she has written your true name at the top. "Don't you dare die to prove you were right," she said. "Take my hand and live to learn you were wrong." He reached. Crow heaved. Cole's boots bit rock. Tala's shoulders burned in a way that had nothing to do with muscles and everything to do with the last year of this country and the next. The canyon exhaled dust. The edge crumbled another inch. Decker slid. Mercy lunged farther than Prudence, grabbed his coat, and for one heartbeat held a man heavier than her convictions. He swung like a bell. Below, the river stretched its cold throat in invitation. "Pull!" Crow shouted, voice raw with the debt it would owe if this failed. They did. They pulled with arms and backs and vows and stories and the river's own long memory braided into their fingers. And then the ledge groaned, dipped, and held, then slipped, then held again by the stubbornness of 4 sets of hands that had decided the morning would not take a life just to make a point. The ledge sagged a final inch. Stone dust gritted in Tala's teeth. Mercy's fingers whitened on Decker's coat. Sheriff Crow's shoulders shook with the effort of not letting the weight of his office, or his history, pull him over the edge along with the man he despised and still refused to lose. Cole braced low, boots wedged, jaw locked. Tala's palm burned against rock, her breath came in iron filings. "Now," Crow grunted, and together they hauled. Decker lurched up and over the lip like a fish too proud to admit it needed air, then crumpled face down, gasping. For a heartbeat nobody spoke. The canyon held its breath with them, as if surprised to find the story hadn't chosen the crueler route. Mercy rolled Decker onto his back and struck his cheek, not to injure, but to wake a man who'd been sleeping under money for too long. "Elias," she said. "Look at the sky you almost robbed from yourself." He squinted through dust, eyes weary, a boy and a tyrant taking turns at the window. Sheriff Crow rose to a knee and, just there, his hand hovered over Decker's shoulder, a reflex as old as neighborhood and as hard to break. Then he remembered the papers in his pocket and the injunction on his tongue. The hand became a badge. "Elias Decker," he said, voice ragged and official, "you're under arrest for attempted sabotage and violation of court order." Decker's mouth twitched in disbelief. "You can't." "I just did," Crow said, and the echo carried down the cut like a rumor finally corrected. 2 deputies scrambled up from the trail as if the canyon had spat them out for being late. They cuffed Decker while he still stared at the place where the rock had decided to become a lesson. His men backed away, faces pale. Jesse stood 3 steps off, arms tight to his sides, as if hugging himself to prevent his bones flying apart under the pressure of choosing. Mercy wiped grit from her cheek with the heel of her hand. "We're done here," she said. "We present this to daylight." She turned to Tala and Ayla. "You shoot like women who have been practicing for years at saving more than yourselves." "We do," Tala said. Relief shook the word in her mouth. She swallowed the tremor and made it into steadiness. But the barn. Cole looked toward Crow's Mercy, smoke still bruising the horizon. His jaw settled like a man inventorying losses and refusing to miscount hope. We go home, he said. We count what remains. By the time they reached the yard, the barn was a half-clawed skeleton. Heat poured off blackened beams in waves that pushed at the eyes. The old dog lay on his side, panting raw. Boone had burned his sleeve to the elbow. He didn't seem to notice, too busy not letting the wind steal the ashes of his temper. Davin and Luke staggered with the last 2 buckets and sloshed them pointlessly at smoking piles because sometimes you keep throwing water after the fight's already over just to tell your hands you didn't quit early. Ayla slid off her horse running, stroking soot-caked muzzles, counting ears like coins. Tala moved to the boys and took each by the back of the neck for a second, steadying without words. They didn't cry. They had the look of lads who have learned the difference between crying and stopping, and would allow neither until someone older said, in that voice you can trust, now. Mercy dismounted and went to Boone with her ledger under her arm like a sacred book, then set it on the well cap with ceremony and flipped to a clean page. Reckoning, she said. What's gone? Hey, Boone said. Half the winters. The tack. The harness. The oat bin. Tools I've owned longer than the sheriffs had the right to vote. But not the house. He tipped his chin that direction. Not the boys. Not us. And the calves? Cole asked, eyes glassing despite the fact he didn't have that habit. Ayla lifted 2 fingers and then a third halfway and made a face. 2 saved. 1 didn't make it. Tala watched it hit him. He didn't flinch much. He flinched exactly enough to show the world he belonged to it. Sheriff Crow, with Decker flanked and cuffed and fuming in a way that made him look like a man finally breathing unfiltered air and not liking it, took stock of the char you can secure men from a canyon, he said to Mercy, but not from spite. Mercy made a mark in the ledger and spoke without looking up. Spite has short legs. It runs fast in a yard and tires quick on a road. She glanced at Decker. We're going to give it a long road. Decker tried for indignation and missed, landing on something smaller and truer. You saved my life, he said to Mercy, and then you gloat? Mercy's laugh sounded like wind over a bottle's mouth. No. I save your life so you can be in the room when your empire shrinks. I am sentimental like that. She nodded to Crow. Take him. They did. Deputies led Decker away past Davin and Luke, who stared, past Boone, who spit without missing, past the house, which stood, paint blistered, windows black with smoke reflection and righteous anger. Jesse stayed behind, eyes flicking between worlds, not yet choosing which one would hold him steady. Cole faced the yard and exhaled sharp. All right, he said, and he sounded like a bell rung once and still humming. No more counting the sorrow. We count to building. Boone hiked up his burned sleeve. First, we count the fools who started this and make sure they don't come back with fire in both hands. Fools are in custody, Crow called over his shoulder. Or will be. He didn't promise more, and Tala appreciated that. Promises are chairs you invite people to sit on. If they're weak, you break more than furniture. Ayla grabbed a shovel. We cut a fire break, she said. Before the wind remembers it as brothers. Tala rolled her shoulders. The ache there had become a companion rather than a complaint. We do better, she said. We build low, with stone, with a roof that sheds spark instead of drinking it. We keep water where it can run downhill to where we need it without arguing first. Sprinklers, Boone muttered like a man cursing in Latin. If we had a pump. Mercy lifted her pen. Pump, she said, and wrote the word like a prayer. Sprinklers. Tin. Nails. Rope. Feed. Blankets. She looked up at Tala. And people. Tala tipped her chin toward the road. They'll come, she said. Because their stories are tied to ours now and the knot will hold if we pull. They came. by afternoon the yard filled with a procession holiness would envy. Women from town carrying quilts and coffee and that particular brand of pep talk only women who have lost and kept going can produce. Men from up the river with shovels and shoulders and pack horses laden with boards. 2 Dine elders from Chief Nez's camp, faces carved by weather and kindness, brought a car of stone salvaged from a washed-out sheep pen and a bag of tools that had more history than shine. Children with pails. Old ones with chairs. Hetty with her ink-stained fingers and Mercy with her ledger open to a page titled, River Keeping. Chief Nez arrived at dusk, riding through smoke like a thought moving through an argument. He dismounted and stood for a long moment, listening with his skin. He nodded once at Tala, at Ayla, at Cole. "I smell choices," he said. "And I smell them made right." "We saved Decker from the canyon," Ayla said, as if confessing. "So we could throw him somewhere more public." The corner of the chief's mouth turned. "Good," he said. "Canyons teach privately. Juries teach in a way the wind can carry." He put a hand on Tala's shoulder, heavy, grounding. "You walked with the river when it asked," he said in Dine Bizad, the language sitting between them like a warm fire on a cold floor. "Your feet are learning how to say yes and when to say no." Tala swallowed, relief and pride twisting into something sharp and sweet. "I have good teachers," she said. "Some with my blood. Some without." He looked at Cole then, considering him the way a blacksmith considers a blade he did not forge but might trust anyway. "You keep your promises," he said. "I keep trying," Cole replied. "And I keep listening." "Good," Chief Nez said. "The river forgives mistakes more easily than it forgives men who will not listen." They built. They built the way you do when you are too tired to stand and you stand anyway. Stone foundation. Tin roof. A bucket brigade for hands. A laugh brigade for hearts. Tala hauled rock until her forearms sang. Ayla strung wire until it ran like a song only she could hear. Boone cut timbers with the focus of a surgeon who would accept no scar if he could help it, and if he could not, he would make it small and tell it to grow into a story worth the pain. Mercy set up a table under a cottonwood where she adjudicated donations like a queen who had renounced the crown in favor of a ledger. Hetty copied names and needs. Sheriff Crow came at dusk with 2 more deputies who looked like they had just discovered which way north was on their moral compass. He set a guard at the south fence and did not insult anyone by pretending it was an act of charity rather than overdue duty. Jesse stayed. He took a hammer and kept taking it even when Boone told him to put it down twice for water. He worked like a penitent. He didn't cry. He should have. Tala kept him at the edge of her sight, not to punish, but to make sure he didn't drift back into the gravity well of a man like Decker and call that fate. At one point she took a mug to him and nudged it into his hand. "Drink," she said. He gulped and coughed, wiped his mouth with a filthy sleeve. "I wanted to be somebody," he blurted. "Turns out I was. Just the wrong kind." "Then be a new kind," Tala said. "You're not a wall. You can move." He nodded too many times, as if he needed to put the notion in his body by repetition. "If Decker's men come for me, I'll." "You'll stay where people can see you," Tala said. "If a man wants to hurt a boy who's trying to be better, make him do it with witnesses." That night they slept in shifts on pallets in the house, the boy's snores like human proof that hope has not died yet. Tala lay awake a long time listening to the wind comb the grass and the new roof tick as it learned the language of cooling. Cole's breathing in the next room was steady, and the steady felt good. She did not examine the shape of that word. Some feelings are like horses, you don't walk up direct. You approach from the side and speak soft. Dawn brought frost with its favorite knife. It also brought a line of wagons and riders from up and down the valley, men with calloused hands who didn't trust paper but trusted their wives. They had heard how Decker had almost taught the river a false lesson, and they had come to jump up and down on the truth until it was back where it belonged. The courthouse smelled of new anger and old wood polish. The judge's mustache drooped from lack of coffee and too much reality. A jury sat in a box including 2 farmers, a miner with missing fingers, a laundress whose eyes could iron wrinkles out of men, and a preacher's wife whose hat said she held opinions the law should consider. Decker entered in yesterday's dust with today's arrogance freshly pressed. He looked diminished, which is to say he looked normal. Mercy did not stand when he passed. Sheriff Crow took his place with a thin sheaf of charges made thick by the story under each count. State versus Decker, the judge announced. On charges of criminal mischief, attempted sabotage of public resource, and others I'll let the prosecutor spell so we don't all drown in Latin. Mercy presented her ledger. Hetty laid out copies. The laundress on the jury leaned forward to read before the judge told her she could. The minor appeared as if letters had become gears he might someday learn to fix. Saul took the stand. He told his truth in a voice that kept remembering it had once loved telling lies and then remembered it no longer had to. He said Decker's name. He said order. He said hint. He said fuse. He said I dropped it. His eyes flicked to Tala once, and then back to his hands, which had found the ability to be empty without complaint. Decker's lawyer objected at every breath. The judge swatted objections away like flies that didn't know the room had become a church. Crow testified to the canyon and the cut into the voice he used when he told a man to drop a gun, the one that had finally remembered how to be honest. Boone testified to the barn and named the smell. The boys testified because they had earned the right to be heard. Mercy testified last, owning her anger like a saddle, not to posture, but to ride. Then Tala took the stand. She did not want to. She went anyway. The court clerk swore her. The room tightened, not with hunger for spectacle, but with the reverence people feel when they realize a person who does not usually speak is about to, and they ought to make space for the words to live. She told them what she saw at the fence, what the knight said at the wire, what a bell sounds like when it rings against a man's intention instead of his hand. She told them what the canyon asked of her and what her arrow answered. She kept her voice low. She made her words earn their keep. She said Decker's name only when required. She said Jesse's when it would plant a seed instead of a brand. Decker's attorney tried to disassemble her with the usual gentleman tools. Miss Begay, he said, you are not a citizen of this territory. I am a citizen of the river, she said. He smiled for the jury like he expected laughter to act as a solvent. That is not a recognized jurisdiction. It recognizes us, she said. It feeds your sheep and remembers your deeds. A murmur. The judge banged his gavel once, more to mark the moment than to silence it. The laundress folded her arms and looked at the attorney like a man who had just tried to sell her soap that didn't clean. Decker chose to cross-examine himself, because men like him believe their mouths are miracles. He stood. Miss Begay, he began, tone oiled. Where were you raised? Where the ground keeps its promises, she said. He blinked, frustrated at a door that refused to have the expected keyhole. Do you own cattle? I own what I carry, she said. And what I return. She let her eyes slide to coal for one breath, because more would cost. I return help that was given. He tried a different tack. You attacked my man at the fence. I stopped him, she said. I gave him a choice. He chose well. You didn't. Objection, the attorney barked on reflex. Overruled, the judge said on principle. Decker's mouth went thin. He looked at the jury as if they were a meeting he could dismiss and found they had quorum without him. He sat. Closing arguments were not sermons, they were barn raisings. Mercy lifted beams of testimony and set them across posts of law until even the preacher's wife in the box nodded like an altar had been built where none stood. Decker's lawyer warned of property rights and the slippery slope of letting the poor think they had the right to be wet where rich men intended dryness. The jury filed out with faces that said they'd already made up their minds and would not admit it until form was satisfied. They returned before the coffee went cold. Guilty, the foreman said, voice trembling with the weight of being the mouth of 12. On all counts. The laundress smiled without showing her teeth. The miner nodded as if a gear had fallen into place deep in the machine of his life. Decker didn't bow. He didn't rage. He did what the newly mortal always do, he looked around for the exit and found none shaped like the old doors. The judge sentenced him to fines, to a term in county custody, to compensatory damages to the victims. More importantly, he stripped him, for now, of the pretense of moral majority. Your hands, the judge said, are not washed. Let that be your education. They stepped into sunlight that had the courtesy to be bright. People clapped without cheering, which is a better sound. Mercy hugged her ledger as if it were a child already grown and gone to a good life. Sheriff Crow exhaled years. Boone lifted his chin like a man who had just seen a sunrise he worried might forget to arrive. Jesse stood on the courthouse steps, shadow sharp at his feet, hat in his hands. He looked at Tala and then at the road away from Decker's orbit. I don't know where to go, he said, simple. Toward work, Tala said. And toward people who'll watch you while you do it and tell you when you start walking like an old mistake. Cole nudged Jesse's shoulder with a knuckle. We can always use nails driven straight, he said. If your hammer can learn. It can, Jesse said, and the ease with which hope slid into his rib cage scared him and steadied him in the same breath. Winter pressed on, offended that anyone would dare to have a court case without its permission. Snow came in manners this time, soft, generous, the kind that makes roofs shrug and children squeal and cattle consider lying down just to feel a cold that isn't trying to make a point. They fed the herd in a line, men and women passing hay along like a prayer chain. The new barn took shape, low, strong, the doors hung on iron hinges. A blacksmith upriver pounded into truth while his wife told him what color stories would look good against tin. Chief Nez stayed a day, then two, then left with the elders and returned again after a week with a wagon piled with juniper, cedar posts, and 3 blue blankets Tala pretended she didn't need and then slept under like a child. He taught Cole a quiet ritual for walking fence without anger, how to stop every 100 yards and let your name leave your mouth without clinging to it, so the land would learn to say it back without thinking it meant possession. Ayla traded songs with the laundress from the jury and learned how to starch a shirt in a way that made a man conscious of his posture and his conscience. Boone taught Mercy how to sling a hammer without bruising her pride. Mercy taught Boone how to sling words without bruising his own. Sheriff Crow came often, not to oversee but to be seen. He stood on the porch in the cold and drank coffee he had not sweetened and watched men mend what other men had tried to break. Sometimes he brought his hat to Mercy and let her shape its brim while he apologized in different words for the same failure. I should have known, I should have seen, I will next time. Mercy accepted each one like stones laid in a useful wall. They never spoke of the night in the canyon when a rock decided to redeem a story by threatening to end it. But sometimes Tala caught Crow looking toward the north, and she knew he was hearing Mercy's voice again. Don't you dare die to prove you were right. She filed the sentence in her chest. Some words are tools you use more than once. Tala learned Crow's mercy in her bones, the way wind found every crack and told you where your pride had failed to seal things, the way cattle looked you in the face when their feet hurt and asked you to admit it. She learned Cole's silences, when they meant retreat and when they meant consideration, wrestling reluctance and winning by points. If she woke sometimes with the shape of his breath in the next room making her chest do an odd skipping thing, she catalogued it without labeling. Names are powerful. You give them sparingly. On a day with a sky like stretched wool, a writer came from town with a newspaper, tiny thing, 2 sheets, ink smudged, as if words were embarrassed to be caught standing still. The headline, such as it was, read, Judge enjoins Decker, River said to have witnesses. Mercy cackled. Boone tacked it to the new barn wall with a nail he was willing to waste for joy. Cole read it aloud to the boys, who then ran to the house to read it again to the dog, who took the news with the stoicism of a creature who mostly cares whether dinner will arrive on time. A week after the trial, Decker's foreman Saul came to the ranch with his hat in his hands and his hands in the shape of supplication but not surrender. He stood at the fence line like a man at a gate on the first day he finally learned how to ask permission. I'm leaving, he said. Town. This county. Maybe the territory. I thought I should tell the river where I'm going. The river knows, Tala said. It keeps ledgers under its skin. He nodded, swallowed. I'll testify again if they ask when Decker appeals. I still don't think I'm good. but I think I'm done being what I was. Good, Ayla said from the post where she leaned. Go where boys like Jesse can't see you and think old habits are a form of gravity. He lifted a hand to Jesse, who was repairing a gate hinge with a concentration that should be taught in schools. You, Saul began, then faltered. Don't be me. Jesse half smiled, eyes on the hinge. Working on it, he said. Every day. Saul rode away with the slowness of a man not proud of much but trying to be honest about the little he had to offer, absence. A thaw came early and stayed like a guest who behaves. Water brimmed where it should. Hooves sank with gratitude instead of pain. The juniper ash medicine Chief Nez had given Cole worked like a story told right, slowly, thoroughly. The herd walked cleaner. The new barn smelled of tin and oil and hopeful hay. The windmill turned with a new certainty, and Ayla declared it a friend as if machines could hear and took delight in the title. On the first day the river ran with the sound of coins in a jar and not knives on a table. Chief Nez returned to escort his daughters home to the winter camp for a week and to settle a promise. He stood in the yard, hands deep in his coat, and looked everywhere at once the way a man does whose eyes have earned their age. It is time, he said. You come sit by your grandmother's fire. You tell me about courts. You teach me how a jury smells when it's thinking about the truth. A smile ghosted his mouth. You bring Cole too. He needs to learn how to lose at cards politely. Cole held up both hands. There are some battles I was born to lose. Ayla hugged Boone like a granddaughter who had discovered a blood relation the world forgot to write down, then whistled the dog and made him promise to miss her in a manageable way. Davin and Luke tried to look as if people leaving was normal. It is. It still hurts. Tala packed a bundle and a bow and moved through the house slow, not because she had more to do than minutes but because the air had thickened with the knowledge that leaving is not the same as abandoning, even when your feet argue in both directions. She paused at the door. Cole stood on the step, hat in hand as if he'd change the weather with his fingers if he could. You'll come back, he said, and made it a statement so she wouldn't have to answer the wrong part of the question. I'll come back, she said. Because the river is one and I haven't finished teaching your fence how to talk. A flicker of a smile. It collapsed into something softer. You saved my life, he said again, not because he thought she hadn't heard him the first time, but because certain debts like being counted aloud more than once so they aren't misplaced. You saved mine, she said. When you said yes to the price. He tipped his hat like you do when you cover your eyes to stop something from spilling out. Be safe, he said. If trouble finds you, tell it you have an appointment here and it can speak to me there. I will, she said. And if it argues, I'll introduce it to my sister. Ayla leaned out from the wagon. I heard that, she called. And I approve. They rode. The river ran beside them, making its small sounds, telling its long story. The cottonwood shook out green thoughts like laundry on a line. Camp smoke lifted straight up, good omen. Grandmother's fire laughed like it knew something funny about the future and would share it later. They slept on rugs that smelled of juniper and earth and the old stories that still contain vitamins long after the men who tried to starve them are dead. They told their grandmother about Mercy Crow and about Saul and about a judge who had learned to pick names that pressed like thumbs. Grandmother listened, eyes half shut, nodding as if the world had finally remembered a lesson she had taught it years ago and then wandered off to forget. You will go back, she said to Tala, not a question. Yes, Tala said. I promised. Good, grandmother said. The land there likes your name. She handed Tala a small pouch of herb and ash. For new wounds. Or old ones that decide to speak again. She put a finger to Tala's chest. And for this. Tala did not ask what she meant. Some pouches are better carried without labels, the medicine decides when to announce its purpose. On the third night, the sky cracked open with light. Storms do that sometimes when spring realizes it overslept. Hail rattled the tent roof like beans in a pan. The arroyo swelled in an hour and then laid down again, chastened. In the morning, the light had that quality it only gets after the sky apologizes, everything new, everything rinsed, everything briefly honest. They rode back, Tala, Ayla, Chief Nez, because promises have return dates. As they crested the mesa where one can see the whole of Crow's Mercy in a single breath, Tala felt her ribs open as if someone had tugged a stitch and found more space under it than any doctor would have predicted. The new barn shone tin bright. The herd looked like a sentence correctly punctuated. The boys saw them and ran. Cole stepped onto the porch with a look that might have been relief if it weren't standing at attention trying not to be recognized. Ayla jumped from the wagon before it stopped and raced the dog to the yard. Tala slid down, her boots tasting dirt with that first step gratitude. Cole was there, then not too close, then exactly as close as felt like safety pretending to be accident. "How's the fence?" she asked. "Talkative," he said. "It learned a new word while you were gone." "What word?" "Welcome." He looked at Chief Nez. "We kept the river's agreement." "I see," Chief Nez said, and his eyes said more. He put a hand on Cole's shoulder. "There is another agreement," he said. "Not made with paper. Made when my daughters left this yard and your face looked like a man teaching himself to trust some new animal in his chest. You will return them in spring and return yourself with them. We will eat. We will shuffle cards. We will see if you can lose with grace twice in one season." "I can," Cole said. "I'm a quick study where losing to the right people is concerned." Spring arrived for real, scandalous and green, exuberant in birds. They moved the herd to new grass that waited like unwrapped gifts. A foal startled at its own legs and then at the concept of anything less than joy. Jesse laughed and then stopped, embarrassed, then didn't be embarrassed anymore and laughed again. Boone pretended not to see that concession to youth and smiled into his collar instead. A letter came from the judge. Decker's appeals had been denied for now, and even if they rose again later like ugly bread, the river would have more friends by then and ugliness would not rise without yeast. Mercy read it aloud with all the drama the content deserved and then considerably more for her own amusements. Sheriff Crow sent word that he'd fired 2 deputies who had held their hands too close to Decker's pockets and hired one woman whose father had taught her to shoot tin cans and injustice with equal accuracy. There were still cuts in the fence sometimes, done by lonely men whose pride had been rewired wrong. But when they came, the bells sang earlier, and the wires bit less, and the hands that cut found themselves caught by other hands in daylight and reminded, firmly and repeatedly, that the river does not change its name just because you shout. Not all stories closed their mouths. A night rider came once and left a note nailed to the gate with a knife. "Paper rules," it read, in a hand that did not like ink. Cole pulled it down and burned it and said nothing. Mercy made a copy before the flame took it. "Evidence," she said. "Or fuel. Same thing, different day." Tala found herself at the window often at dusk, watching for trouble and finding more birds than men. Sometimes Cole joined her and they didn't speak because it wasn't necessary. On a thickly starred night when the wind had the decency to stop fussing, he asked, quietly, "Do you ever think about leaving?" She considered the question as if it were a calf with a burr stuck in its tail, worth patience, not tugging. "I think about moving," she said. "Not about leaving. I'm not a tree." He chuckled, then sobered. "I used to think safety lived where other people didn't. Where fences made my world small enough I could watch it all from one window. Turns out safety lives where witnesses do." "Witnesses," she echoed. The word had grown in her like a rooted thing. He glanced at her then, let the look rest. The dog sighed in his sleep like he was negotiating with rabbits in a dream. Davin snored. The windmill ticked. "When summer comes," Cole said, "and your father says the price is paid, will you?" He stopped. "I will decide," she said. "And I will choose a way that lets me be big." "Good," he said, and you could hear in his voice how much effort men sometimes must spend to let a woman choose and call that love instead of loss. On the last cold morning that dared call itself spring, the river stood up a little and stretched. The cottonwoods rattled coin green. Chief Nez rode in with his face thunder bright and joy creased. He dismounted without hurry and yet with urgency, an old dancer remembering steps. "What?" Tala asked, stomach flipping with that good fear that precedes news. "Counsel," he said. Up and down the valley. Not paper council. People. We will make an agreement with the river in words that men can understand and that the river will tolerate. A covenant. He looked at Mercy. You will write it. Not with law's mouth. With ours. Mercy's grin could have lit a barn without help. I've been waiting all winter to be asked, she said. And writing the guardrails in my head while I salted soup. They gathered under the cottonwoods behind the new barn, because the trees had the manners to listen and the river had the nerve to speak when men thought a meeting was just for them. Women lined up with baskets. Men lined up with hats. Children ran, were shushed, ran again. The judge came in his shirt sleeves without his mustache looking combed. He sat in the back like a man off duty who still preferred the view from responsibility. Sheriff Crow took off his hat and kept it off. Boone polished a plank with the flat of his palm and called it a table. Mercy stood at it, ledger open to a page titled in a hand that had waited, "The River is One." "What do we promise?" she asked, head up, eyes like a hawk that had decided to be helpful for one afternoon. They spoke. One by one, in phrases humble and clean. "We promise we won't cut fence when we can knock on a door. We promise we won't poison wells just to win an argument with a neighbor. We promise to share in drought and restrain in flood. We promise to teach boys that power isn't the right to harm and that crying at the right time is a skill. We promise to make paper that tells the truth instead of hiding it. We promise to listen when women say the bells are singing." Henny wrote on separate sheets as Mercy read to be sure everyone could see themselves in the lines. Cole spoke softly from the back. "We promise to count the living first and the losses second." Boone added, "We promise to remember who brought coffee when our barn fell." The laundress from the jury, now an inevitable fixture, said, "We promise to wash shame out of uniforms same as blood." The preacher's wife said, "We promise not to baptize greed by calling it progress." The judge, from the rear, said, "We promise the law will try to read the world the way it is and not the way money tells it to be." Chief Nez listened, then lifted a hand. "We promise," he said, "to remember that the river has its own mouth and we are visitors at it. We promise not to rename things that have already named themselves." He looked at Tala. "And we promise to keep witnesses in motion so no man ever believes a fence can keep them from seeing." Mercy set down her pen and blew on the page. "Sign," she said simply, and the people lined up like a procession on a holiday. Some made marks. Some wrote names with shaky pride. Some pressed hands and left prints because ink, like water, can take the shape of a palm and hold it. Tala pressed her hand next to Ayla's, their fingers overlapping as they had done on nights in childhood when thunder taught fear and sisters taught each other how to answer. Cole signed simple, Cole Matheson, with a steady weight. Boone added his name with unnecessarily flourished BS and then pretended he hadn't. Mercy signed last and then drew a line across the bottom that told the page, "Stop here, pride does the rest." They read it aloud together. It sounded like river. It sounded like rooster dawns and calf balls and coffee poured thick. It sounded like a kind of law made of witness and stubbornness and the understanding that this place would keep being itself long after the people had changed their hats. The covenant did not make them safe. It made them seen. Decker would appeal. Others with money would arrive in carriages with paper that smelled like lawyers and Eastern maps. Sheriff Crow would lose his temper once and find it again before he did damage. Boone's knees would argue with stairs. Mercy would keep the ledger open on a table by a window, and sometimes the wind would turn a page as if it were curious about tomorrow's entry. Tala stood in the yard at sunset and let the day set pencil marks on her skin. Ayla sang something light and ridiculous to the windmill and got it to spin on stubborn bearings. Jesse told Davin and Luke a story about a fuse and made himself the fool, not the hero, and the telling did honest work in his mouth. Cole came to stand beside Tala and did not speak. She liked him better that way sometimes, not for the silence, but for the listening he did inside it. "You're staying," he said at last, not a question. "I'm staying this season," she said. "And the next one, if the river agrees." "What does the river ask in payment?" "Witnesses," she said. "Always witnesses." He nodded. I can do that. He hesitated. Will you? He stopped. She looked at him. I will make room for the new animal in your chest, she said softly. If you make room for the size of me. He huffed a quiet laugh, blown at the ground like a secret he wasn't ready to throw into the wind. Deal, he said. The dog barked at nothing in particular. The wind backed off. The bells on the wire did not ring. Night unrolled without knives. And over by the river a heron lifted off the water and wrote its quiet message across the sky: move, but do not run, look down while you fly, trust the shape your body makes when it does what it was made to do. Later, when the house breathed evenly and the barn creaked the way barns do when they're learning how to sleep after being born, Tala took out her grandmother's pouch and held it in her palm. It was heavier tonight, somehow, without gaining weight. She untied it. Inside, ash, yes. Sage powder. And a sprig of something green that had no business still being alive in a bag all these weeks and yet was. She smiled, closed the pouch, and placed it over her heart before she slept. Morning would be work. And words. And the kind of hard that makes a woman's spine remember it as a column in a house the wind has tried to tilt. But tonight, the story stood still long enough for witnesses to count it true. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.